My husband of 20 years threw hurtful words at me, saying it was my fault we didn't have kids, calling me defective. That was when I realized I couldn't stay with him any longer. Now, he's off dreaming about a new marriage. And maybe God saw this cruel behavior. Perhaps that's why something happened to him. My name is Lisa. I'm 45 years old, and I work as a secretary at a law firm. My husband and I have been married for almost 20 years, living a simple life together. We both wanted children, but it never happened, mostly due to issues on my side. I tried every treatment I could, draining myself physically, emotionally, and financially, but nothing worked. When I turned 40, we finally decided to stop trying. My husband still wanted kids and urged me to continue, but I was exhausted, and the costs were piling up. With the cost of retirement looming, I suggested that we stop the treatments and focus on enjoying our lives together instead. Reluctantly, he agreed. From then on, we decided to live for ourselves. But even now, 5 years after stopping treatments, I feel guilty and sad that I couldn't have children. One day, I decided to go to a school reunion after about 10 years. My husband thought it would be good for me to take a break, so I planned to stay overnight at a hotel nearby, making it feel like a mini vacation. Since we married, I'd hardly ever gone out on my own. Most of my life was wrapped up in those infertility treatments. This little getaway felt like a rare luxury. At the reunion, I had fun reconnecting with old friends. "Lisa, long time no see, you look a bit slimmer than before," one friend commented. She was right. I had lost about 22 pounds over the last decade. "I'm so jealous. I've gained 33 pounds since getting married and having kids," she said. Even though it was small talk, comments like this stung a bit. "Lisa, any kids?" another friend asked. "No, it's just the two of us," I replied, trying to keep things upbeat, even though it was a sensitive subject. "Oh, I'm sorry for bringing it up," she quickly apologized, and we moved on, trying to keep things light and fun. Then, one friend shared a story that surprised me. "My son almost got caught up in a marriage scam recently," she said. I was shocked. "A scam?" I asked. "Yes, he was asked to lend $20,000 because they were supposedly getting married, but luckily it didn't work out," she explained. "My son didn't have enough money to pay that much, so he came to us for advice," my friend continued. "That's how we found out it was a scam. The woman disappeared after that." It was terrifying. I was shocked that something like this had happened so close to home. Thankfully, her son had a new girlfriend now, and his parents felt relieved. The reunion went smoothly, and when it ended, I decided to skip the after party and head back to my hotel. I enjoyed a quiet drink alone, then remembered I hadn't checked in with my husband. It was only 10 p.m., so he'd probably still be awake. I tried calling home several times, but he didn't pick up. Maybe he'd gone to sleep early, I thought, brushing it off even though I had an uneasy feeling. Maybe it was just a woman's intuition. After that night, my husband started coming home very late on weekdays. Usually drunk, he'd stumble in, throw his shoes off, and collapse on the living room floor. "Show some respect, I'm home," he'd mumble in a drunken slur. For what, exactly? I thought to myself, picking up his shoes and clothes. One night, he mumbled, "Alyssa is cute, isn't she? If only you were as young as Alyssa." Alyssa? Who was Alyssa? What did he mean by "if only you were young"? By the time I thought to ask, he was already snoring. Could he be cheating on me? My uneasiness from that night at the reunion was turning into a real suspicion, but I kept telling myself, no, my husband wouldn't do that. He's a decent man. I tried to brush it off as drunken nonsense. But he kept leaving early on weekends, coming back late and drunk. This happened so often that I had to ask, "You've been out drinking almost every night. Are we doing okay financially?" "Mind your own business," he snapped. "It's my money. I'll do what I want with it. I've got savings from before we got married. But we need to save for our old age. We'll be in trouble later if we don't." "Then you save up," he said bitterly. "I already spent too much on treatments, all because you're defective." Even if he was drunk, I couldn't believe my husband would talk to me this way. His attitude towards me was changing, and I began to wonder if I'd become more submissive since we stopped treatment. His hurtful remarks were increasing. "Since you can't have kids, you should at least show me more affection," he'd say. With each selfish comment and careless spending, my love for him faded a little more. I remembered how kind he used to be, caring for me when I was struggling through treatments. Would he ever be that husband again? After 20 years, I started to question what our marriage really meant. Then, one day, things changed suddenly. Lisa, we need to talk, he said one evening, sitting on the couch with a serious look. What's going on? Why the formality? I asked. I want a divorce, he said bluntly. What? You're joking, right? Where's this coming from? Divorce had never crossed my mind. Sure, we had issues to work through, but ending the marriage? I never thought it would come to that, but maybe he'd been thinking about it all along. After 20 years, you suddenly want a divorce? Why? I asked, trying to understand. You're really clueless, aren't you? He sighed, looking at me with disdain. I've wanted kids all these years. I feel like I've been cheated out of fatherhood because I got stuck with someone defective like you. Did you ever think about my feelings? He pounded the table, speaking in an angry, arrogant tone. I felt a wave of sadness and frustration. That's not fair, I said, almost in tears. We both agreed to stop the treatments, remember? No, you decided to stop. I never wanted to give up on having a child. Why hadn't he told me this before? Just as I was trying to process his words, he pushed some papers across the table. Here, sign these divorce papers, and I won't have anything else to say. I stared at the papers, shocked. What? You're serious? Yes, I'm serious, he said smugly. I'm already planning to remarry. What? Remarry? My mind raced. Are you having an affair? Oh, it's not an affair. Once we're divorced, I'll marry her. She's 20 years old. He said this with a satisfied smile. A 20-year-old? My heart sank. Alyssa, she's so sweet and cute, the perfect wife. Not like you. That's when it hit me. Alyssa was the name he'd drunkenly mentioned before. My intuition had been right. Then he showed me a picture of Alyssa. As I looked closely, I could barely contain my laughter. Was he serious? This couldn't be real. But I held back, keeping my expression calm. I wasn't ready to let him in on what I was thinking just yet. So, you really want a child that much? I asked. Yes, since you can't have kids, what choice do we have? You'll agree to the divorce, won't you? He replied confidently. I pretended to look more upset than I felt. Sure, it hurt when he first brought up divorce, but now, seeing how foolish he was, I felt like this was the best decision. Maybe this was some kind of divine sign to move on. I signed the divorce papers and left him behind, thinking he'd regret this one day. Time would tell. Fast forward a year after our divorce. Lisa, please help me. A shabby-looking man approached me as I was heading home from work. Excuse me, who are you? I asked, genuinely not recognizing him at first. It's me, Lisa. I need your help. It was my ex-husband, though he was barely recognizable. He looked worn down, his cheeks hollow, and his clothes in bad shape. Long time, no see, I said, surprised at how much he'd changed. Please, Lisa, could you introduce me to a lawyer at your firm? I can't just do that out of the blue. Lawyers charge fees, you know, I told him. I don't have that kind of money. Please help me, he pleaded. Curious and feeling a bit sorry for him, I agreed to listen to his story at a nearby cafe. Before he could say much, I asked, did that girl, Alyssa, run off? He looked shocked. How did you know? Just as I thought. When he had shown me a picture of his new girlfriend, Alyssa, I'd immediately recognized her from my school reunion. She looked exactly like a woman my classmate's son had been scammed by. At the reunion, my classmate had shared her photo, warning everyone about this young woman who was a con artist. Her name then had been Sally, though I assumed even that was fake. So you did know about Alyssa? I asked him, almost amused. Well, yes, he admitted, defeated. Then he began explaining what happened. So you really want a child that badly? I asked. Yes, since you can't give birth, what else can we do? You'll agree to the divorce, won't you? He said coldly. I pretended to look more upset than I actually felt. Sure, I'd been hurt when he first mentioned divorce, but now, seeing how foolish he was, I felt like leaving him was the right choice. It was almost as if some higher power was guiding me to do this. I signed the divorce papers and left him behind, thinking he'd regret this someday. I'd just wait and see. Fast forward a year after the divorce. Lisa, please help me. A scruffy-looking man approached me as I was heading home from work. Excuse me, who are you? I asked, genuinely not recognizing him. It's me, Lisa. I need your help. It was my ex-husband, though he was barely recognizable. His face looked hollow and he was dressed poorly. Long time, no see, I replied, surprised at how much he'd changed. Please, Could you introduce me to a lawyer at your firm? I can't just do that without reason. Lawyers charge fees, you know, I said. I don't have that kind of money. Please help me, he pleaded. I could tell he was having money troubles, and I felt a bit sorry for him. Out of curiosity, I agreed to listen to his story at a nearby cafe. Well, actually, he began. But before he could say more, I interrupted. Did that girl, Alyssa, run off? He looked shocked. How did you know? Just as I thought. When he'd shown me a picture of his new girlfriend, Alyssa, I had recognized her from a photo at my school reunion. She looked exactly like a young woman who had scammed a classmate's son. At the reunion, my classmate had shared her picture to warn everyone about this con artist. Her name then had been Sally, though even that was probably fake. So you knew about Alyssa? I asked, almost amused. Well, yes, he admitted, defeated. Then he started telling me what had happened since. Alyssa had cleverly avoided taxes by keeping her gifts from my ex-husband under the $11,000 limit. That's why he thought she was a good girl who didn't ask for expensive gifts. She knew exactly how to work the system. So, what should I do now? He asked me, looking lost. I don't know, maybe consult a lawyer, but it'll cost you, I replied. Hearing this, his shoulders slumped. I've already spent all my savings. The woman I loved ran off. And I can't even face my coworkers. I bragged to them all about marrying a younger woman. His miserable expression was almost pitiful, but it was hard to forget that he'd brought this on himself. Lisa, it's my fault. Please come back to me. I realize now that you were the only one who truly cared about me. I don't even want kids anymore. I'll let you do whatever you want. You must have been lonely too, right? Did he still think I loved him? That part of my life ended half a year ago. It was time to remind him of reality. It's been a year. Don't you think it's a little too late for this change of heart? Lisa, are you going to abandon me? He asked, looking desperate. You were the one who wanted the divorce, remember? You're the only person I can rely on, he mumbled, looking utterly defeated. I decided to offer him a small favor. All right, then, how about I call up a lawyer friend? Lisa, thank you. I knew I could count on you, he said, teary-eyed. The lawyer who came to meet us at the cafe was Mr. Johnson from my firm. John, over here, I called, as he approached. Lisa, who's this? My ex-husband asked, sensing something was up. This is Mr. Johnson. We've actually been dating for 6 months now. So, what advice do you need? I replied. My ex-husband looked dazed. Oh. I think that's all for now, he stammered before hurrying out of the cafe. He couldn't afford the legal help he needed, so he gave up and accepted his fate. I later heard that word had spread through his office about his bad luck, dumped by both his fiancée and his ex-wife. Apparently, one of his colleagues had overheard everything at the cafe. Now, he's scrambling to find someone new, terrified of being alone in his old age. Later, Mr. Johnson asked me, who was that guy, anyway? I told him the whole story and apologized for dragging him into my plan. Sorry for the trouble. No worries, Lisa, glad I could help. By the way, are you free for dinner? He asked. Caught off guard, I felt a bit flustered. A fresh start in my 40s, it wasn't such a bad idea. Yes, I'd love to, I replied, feeling a spark of excitement. I had a feeling that the future was about to get a lot brighter.
Hi, I'm Shirley, a 31-year-old office worker. A year ago, I married Mason, a man I met on a blind date. After a year and a half of dating, he proposed. Settling down had always been my dream, so even though the proposal felt a bit hasty, I said yes. In hindsight, I realized I should have taken a more cautious approach. Not long after our wedding, Mason made a surprising decision to switch jobs. When I asked him about it, he explained that his previous position didn't allow him to fully showcase his skills. What stunned me even more was his announcement that he had already resigned and would be leaving by the end of the month. Thankfully, he found another job quickly, but it came with a lower salary than his last position. At first, I wasn't too worried since I had my own job, but then Mason started pushing me to quit. I might have considered it if his new salary had been enough to support us both, but with his recent job change, his pay was lower. He kept insisting it would go up soon, yet there was no indication of when that might happen. Quitting my job under such uncertain financial circumstances felt risky. We relied on my income to save and cover essential expenses like rent and car payments. Depending solely on Mason's current salary just wasn't practical. One evening, Mason handed me divorce papers, seemingly to intimidate me. "You know I'm ready for this whenever," he challenged. I urged him to take a breath and rethink his words, but he simply stood up and retreated to his room. That confrontation left me reflecting on the hasty decisions and unexpected changes that had occurred since I met Mason. I firmly told him I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. At first, he seemed to accept my stance, but the topic kept coming up. Each time he mentioned it, I stood my ground with the same unwavering response. Now, a year into our marriage, Mason's salary still hadn't changed, yet he kept pressuring me to quit my job. "When are you going to leave?" he would ask, and I often felt the urge to respond sarcastically. However, I knew our financial stability hinged on my income. If it was so crucial for me to resign, I believed Mason should focus on advancing his own career instead. As time passed, I began to understand why Mason was so adamant about my leaving work. This became evident during our visits to his parents' house. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would feign concern, claiming he wanted to ease her burden. She would express her gratitude, and then he would glance at me pointedly, as if nudging me toward resignation. He suggested she needed help. But Martha was anything but helpless. She was active, healthy, and even held a part-time job that funded her hobbies and social life. It was clear she didn't require my assistance, yet Mason continued to push for my departure. "If only one of us could be home during the day, we could check on Mom every day," Mason said one day, seemingly out of nowhere. It was clear he envisioned me visiting Martha daily, which felt overwhelming and unnecessary. I asked him directly what he expected me to do since Martha was perfectly capable on her own. He listed off mundane tasks like helping with housework and running errands. It was obvious he had plans for how I could contribute, but none of them justified leaving my career. This endless cycle of requests and justifications was exhausting. I needed Mason to realize that while I was willing to support his family when needed, giving up my job without a solid reason was not something I could take lightly. "But Martha has her part-time job and spends most of her days out with friends, right?" I pointed out when he suggested I could take care of housework during the day. His response left me puzzled. Was he really implying I should become his mother's maid? Mason was deeply concerned about maintaining a certain image, especially in front of his parents. If he was so eager to take care of them, why couldn't he handle the household chores himself? Despite his persistent pressure, I stood firm in my decision not to quit my job. I also opted not to visit my in-laws on my days off, though I did make an effort to see them during major holidays like New Year's. As I reflected on our visits, a pattern emerged. Mason frequently delegated tasks to me, asking me to tidy up, assist his mom, or run errands. I pushed back against these requests. When he suggested I go to the store, I would reply, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His standard excuse was that it wouldn't look right if he did it himself. A rationale I found both puzzling and manipulative. It seemed he was more focused on controlling the situation and projecting an image of family care than on genuinely caring for his parents or me. As time passed, my perception of Mason changed. It became clear that he was more focused on appearances than on genuine affection or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out or even consider quitting his job to care for his mother, his reaction spoke volumes. He looked both disgusted and uncomfortable, replying, "That's not something I'm supposed to do. I'm giving you these instructions so my mom thinks you're a considerate, useful wife. You should appreciate how kind I'm being." His words were revealing. He essentially wanted to shift all the demanding tasks onto me while showcasing his virtue as if it were something extraordinary. But I am neither his servant nor his subordinate, and I certainly didn't deserve to be disrespected in front of my in-laws. It became increasingly clear that Mason's priorities were misaligned, valuing appearances over genuine partnership and support. If he continued with these unreasonable demands, I refused to stay silent. I will stand my ground. Despite our numerous discussions, Mason hasn't changed. He keeps pestering me with the same question. "Are you going to quit your job?" Furthermore, every time we visit my in-laws, he continues to boss me around as he always has. After reaching my breaking point, I realized it was time for a serious conversation. "We need to talk about our future," I said, hoping to guide our discussion towards something constructive. "What are you even trying to say?" Mason shot back, clearly annoyed. "I'm honestly fed up. I'm tired of you constantly asking when I'll quit my job, and I'm exhausted from the pressure to take care of Martha, I expressed, laying out my grievances. Why are you so upset about that? You're my wife, and it's your duty to care for my parents, Mason retorted. Don't you think it's unfair to place that responsibility solely on me? Shouldn't you, as their biological child, the one helping with the housework and caring for them? I challenged, confronting his outdated views. No way, it's the wife's duty to do it. Are you the kind of person who doesn't care about family? Mason accused, clearly upset by my resistance. I'm disappointed to hear you say that, he added. Seizing the moment to highlight the double standard, I asked, then let me ask you this. How have you been caring for my parents? If I asked you to take care of them, would you do it? Mason stared at me blankly, struggling to understand the connection. What are you saying? Why should a husband be responsible for his wife's parents? So does that mean you won't ever take care of my parents? I pressed, aiming to highlight his inconsistency. The husband's parents and the wife's parents are totally different, Mason replied, missing the point entirely. What difference does that make? I don't understand, I said, feeling increasingly frustrated. I didn't realize you were so out of touch. It's like talking to my old boss. What are you trying to say? Mason asked, clearly confused. I'm saying that a husband should take care of his own parents, and you should support your wife's family too, I replied, trying to emphasize the importance of mutual support and equality in our responsibilities. I felt the need to clarify, so I added, so you only prioritize your own blood relatives. I'm really disappointed in you. I won't be visiting your parents anymore. Why would you do that? Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense, he shot back. No way. How dare you talk to me like that? My mom is right, Mason exclaimed, his temper flaring. Ha, your mom was talking about you. She said you're a badly behaved husband. That's why she gave me this, he said, pulling a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. What? You had divorce papers ready? I asked, shocked, but Mason looked oddly proud of himself. See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm ready for this anytime, so think about what you just said, Mason declared smugly before heading to his room. Unbelievable. Why is Mason so selfish? I thought, fuming. That triumphant look on his face made it clear that the divorce papers were just a threat to manipulate me. The fact that Martha was involved only fueled my suspicion. Mason was acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It was ridiculous. I wouldn't let him have his way. How could he not see that our marriage was in serious trouble with this behavior? His lack of understanding only frustrated me further. Mason had already completed the divorce papers and handed them to me with witnesses present, including Martha and his friends. This meant I could sign and file them whenever I wanted. The next day after Mason left for work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office as a precaution. I also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate. Knowing Mason might threaten to file a marriage certificate on his own, I called my parents to explain the situation. When they learned I had prepared the divorce papers, they were initially shocked but quickly rallied behind my decision. Outraged by Mason's behavior, they offered to help me move my belongings right away. Taking a leave from work, I had my parents come over, and together we relocated all my things to their house while Mason was out. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting on my marriage, it became clear that Mason never contributed his fair share to our household chores. I was the one cooking dinner after long workdays and managing all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which simply wasn't feasible. That evening, Mason called, likely just back from work. Hey, where are you right now? He asked. I'm at my parents' house, I replied. Oh, why would you go back there without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night, he questioned, his tone a mix of surprise and selfishness. I almost laughed at how oblivious he was to the seriousness of the situation, thinking I was just staying overnight when I had actually taken most of my belongings with me. I'm not coming back, I said firmly. What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food, he demanded. Make it yourself, I replied, ending the call. I couldn't engage in a conversation about divorce while he continued to be so dismissive. To find some peace, I decided to block his number and wait for him to come to my parents' house. A week later, Mason arrived at my parents' home, accompanied by his parents. They all wore serious expressions as we faced off in the living room, 3 against 3. "How could you do this? How could you leave without my permission?" Mason demanded, incredulity and accusation lacing his voice. "You treated me like a housekeeper, Mason. All I ever asked was for you to take responsibility for your family," I replied, stating my ground. "That's not true. What kind of wife would I be if I didn't take care of Mason?" Martha shot me a fierce glare. My father began to tremble with anger, but I quickly intervened. Mason insisted that I quit my job to care for Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife. Yet when it comes to my own family, he expects me to manage everything alone. Ultimately, Mason seeks obedience, using me to take care of his parents while taking all the credit. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine. "Have you ever heard Mason say these things?" I asked. Martha continued to glare, but Liam looked confused, as if he hadn't known about any of this before. "Let me clear the air," Mason interjected, waving the divorce papers and claiming it was all Martha's idea. "Why would you say that?" Liam asked, clearly taken aback. "Oh no, it's because Camila has an attitude problem," Martha stammered. "And did you really say that Camila's parents aren't a priority?" I pressed. "Well, it's only natural for your parents to come first," Martha shot back defensively. "Don't be absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camila has faced, but it seems you're the one at fault. Don't hide behind her parents' authority to manipulate the situation," Liam said, causing Mason to visibly shrink in his seat. Liam then turned to me and my parents, offering an apology. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him." "Liam, you're not to blame at all, so please don't apologize," I replied. "Thank you for your understanding, but there's something else I need to address." I turned to Mason, who now looked nervous. "The divorce papers you gave me? I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Mason and Martha both turned pale. "Why did you file those without my permission?" Mason demanded, his shock evident. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you filled out your part and had Martha sign as a witness," I calmly explained, leaving Mason momentarily speechless. Seeing the escalating tension, Liam intervened, furious. "Mason, you used divorce as a threat," he exclaimed, and in a moment of rage, slapped Mason across the face. Martha looked visibly shaken by the scene. Liam then turned to me and offered a sincere apology. "I sincerely apologize that you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Mason, I'm truly sorry for the damage done to your marriage," Liam said, tightening his grip on Mason's collar as he demanded apologies from both him and Martha before ushering them out of the house. Later, I expressed my gratitude to Liam for his intervention. He reassured me that all of Mason's assets and property would be transferred to me without any complications, considering my higher income and the effort I had invested in managing our household. It was a relief to know I had secured everything from our marriage. I later learned that Liam had divorced Martha, clearly appalled by her behavior. One day, I bumped into a colleague from Mason's former workplace who had some surprising news. Mason hadn't been performing well at his job and was frequently criticized by his boss. In a fit of defiance, he resigned and switched jobs, which only deepened my frustration with him. Instead of owning up to his shortcomings, he chose to blame others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new position. Now, I feel a sense of relief having left him behind. I've rented a cozy apartment and am enjoying my newfound independence. Work is going well, and I'd even received a raise recently. For now, I'm not interested in dating. I prefer to focus on my career. Mason was always more concerned with appearances than with genuine skills. He put on a show at home but never made any real progress in his career. It's unfortunate how some spouses resort to using divorce threats as a way to feel powerful. It's a major misstep. I hope they eventually recognize their mistakes and find happiness on their own. As for me, I'm grateful to have moved on from Mason and look forward to the possibility of meeting someone special when I'm ready. Hello, my name is Kelly. Ever since I was a child, I dreamed of becoming a journalist or working in magazine publishing. My passion for writing and staying on top of trends naturally led me to pursue a degree in journalism and media. During college, I immersed myself in the world of storytelling, and upon graduation, I started working for several companies. While none were particularly well known, I took pride in knowing I was living out my dream. Around the time I turned 30, I met Matthew, my future husband. Matthew came from a wealthy family that ran a successful business. And while this seemed like a minor detail at first, it turned out to be a significant factor in my life. His mother, Grace, never approved of me. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't consider me a suitable match for her son, often criticizing my career in journalism and belittling my academic background. Grace's negative attitude was hurtful at first. It's difficult to feel constantly undermined, especially by someone who should welcome you into the family. For reasons only she could understand, Grace thought it was acceptable to treat me poorly. Thankfully, Matthew always stood by me, defending me against her harsh words. His father, Larry, was also on my side, stating not for me whenever Grace crossed the line. Over time, I grew more resilient to her jabs. Matthew even suggested we distance ourselves from her, but I disagreed. Matthew worked closely with his father in the family business, and distancing ourselves from Grace could have made things uncomfortable for Larry, who was nothing but kind. I didn't want to be the cause of tension in their family, nor did I want Matthew to sever ties with his mother. I learned to be patient, recognizing that maintaining family relationships often involves navigating complex emotions and difficult circumstances. We limited our interactions with Grace to a few times a month, but that dynamic shifted when Larry had to travel overseas for business. Grace, not wanting to be alone, moved in with us until his return. I was hesitant about the arrangement but believed that family should come first. Living with Grace, however, was far more challenging than I anticipated. She found fault in almost everything I did, and her criticisms seemed relentless. Still, I managed to maintain my composure, reminding myself that as long as her words caused no actual harm, I could endure her presence. But my patience was truly tested during a particularly stressful week at work. I was leading a major redesign for a section of our magazine, an important project that could lead to a promotion. The pressure was immense, and Grace, oblivious to the weight of my responsibilities, seemed indifferent to the stress I was under. The night before my big presentation, I was discussing my anxieties with Matthew when Grace overheard us. She waltzed into the living room and decided to offer her unsolicited opinion. "Well, Kelly," she began, "I overheard your conversation, and honestly, you probably don't have the skills for this. You'll likely do poorly tomorrow." Her words were cold, and she followed up with, "Maybe it's time to quit and focus on being a housewife." Her comment stung deeply, not just because of the lack of support, but because it revealed her complete disregard for my professional aspirations. I tried to brush it off, but then she added, "I can't believe he married a journalist." Her tone was dripping with scorn, as if my career and everything I worked for were worthless in her eyes. Frustrated, I finally stood up for myself. "Grace, you're overstepping. I don't have time for this right now. I have more important things to focus on than your opinion of me." She looked stunned by my boldness. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shot back, turning to Matthew. "Say something. Your wife is disrespecting your mother." But Matthew stayed calm, siding with me. "Mom, she's just defending herself. There's nothing wrong with that." Grace, clearly offended, accused me of turning Matthew against his family. "Look how easily you've turned him against us," she spat. "You'll regret this, Kelly." Her intrusion into our private conversation and her blatant disrespect left me simmering with anger, but I chose not to let it consume me. Matthew tried to apologize on her behalf, but I stopped him. It wasn't his burden to bear. After that heated exchange, we decided to call it a night. My mind was too occupied with my presentation to dwell on Grace's threats, but the tension lingered. The next morning, I focused on what truly mattered: my career and the opportunity ahead. I arrived at work early, eager and prepared for my presentation. But when I opened my laptop, I was met with a heart-stopping discovery. All the files on my desktop were gone. It was as if my laptop had been completely reset. Panic surged through me as I frantically checked my email, hoping the backups I'd sent would save me. But to my horror, even my inbox and trash had been wiped clean. Overwhelmed and fighting back tears, I approached my boss to explain the situation. His reaction was anything but understanding. He reprimanded me harshly, his voice sharp with frustration, and then coldly told me to forget the presentation altogether. The weight of his words hit me hard. As if that wasn't enough, I soon found out that my boss had a backup presenter lined up, just in case I failed. In that moment, it became painfully clear that my chances for advancement at the company were slim. Devastated by the turn of events, I left the office in tears, my heart heavy with disappointment. When I got home, Matthew was still there. The moment he saw me, his expression changed, and without hesitation, he decided to take the day off to be with me. He pulled me into his arms as I cried, the stress and heartbreak of the morning overwhelming me. Once I had calmed down a little, he gently asked, "What happened, honey? Didn't the presentation go well?" "There was no presentation," I replied, my voice shaky. "At least not by me." Matthew looked at me confused. "What do you mean? You've been working so hard on this for days. You barely slept." I took a deep breath, still struggling with the shock of it all. When I got to work and opened my laptop, everything was gone. All the files were deleted. His brows furrowed in disbelief. "How is that even possible?" "It's embarrassing," I admitted, the memory still fresh and stinging. I had to explain the whole thing to my boss. I'd backed everything up by emailing it to myself, but even my inbox and trash had been completely emptied. Matthew's face softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry this happened. What did your boss say?" I sighed, the words still heavy on my chest. He was furious. He called me unprofessional and lazy. And the worst part, he had someone else ready to give the presentation. The bitterness in my voice was hard to hide. "But you still have your job, right?" Matthew tried to find a silver lining. "Yes, but I'm stuck. There's no room for me to advance or move up. I'm done here," I said, defeated. "Don't worry, honey. You'll find a better job. I'll be here for you through it all. Just keep working there until you're ready to leave," he reassured me, his support unwavering. "Yeah, I'll give my notice soon. I can't believe I worked so hard for this, and just when I was so close, it all slipped away," I said, the realization sinking in. The whole incident had left me shaken. I'd always taken pride in my work, and to have a project unravel so disastrously felt traumatic. Though I stayed on for another week, my heart wasn't in it anymore. When I finally submitted my resignation, I was counting down the days until I could walk away. Throughout this ordeal, Grace's reaction was strangely gleeful. She caught me in tears one day and instead of offering comfort, made snide remarks, gloating over my misfortune. At first, her words fueled my anger. But then I realized that her satisfaction in my struggles was just a reflection of her own bitterness. As I reflected on Grace's behavior, an unsettling thought crossed my mind. What if her delight wasn't just about me leaving my job? What if she had actually been involved in the disaster? The suspicion gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Grace might have sabotaged my laptop. The idea that she could have played a role in the ruin of my career haunted me. Before bringing such a serious accusation to Matthew, I knew I needed concrete proof. Determined to uncover the truth, I devised a plan to monitor her discreetly. I purchased a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector and installed it in my home office. I synced the device with my phone, setting everything up to capture any suspicious activity. The next part of my plan was to bait Grace into revealing her possible involvement. I made it a point to appear visibly stressed and anxious whenever I was in the office, hoping it would draw her attention. Matthew was still at work, completely unaware of the unfolding drama. As expected, Grace took notice of my anxious pacing. "What's wrong? Are you stressed about another project?" she prodded, her tone dripping with false concern. Taking a deep breath, I decided to play into her curiosity. "Yeah, it's just been really tough lately," I confided, setting the trap. "I've been given another chance to present my work. It could lead to a raise," I shared, trying to mask my anxiety with a glimmer of hope. Grace's interest was immediately piqued, her tone dripping with both surprise and skepticism. "Oh, really?" "Yes," I continued, "but I'm nervous. This is my last chance to get it right, and I have to do well." I watched her reaction carefully, hoping to catch a hint of her true intentions. "Why aren't you telling Matthew? Are you embarrassed about your job?" she asked, her words sharp. "It's not that," I sighed. "I just don't want to disappoint him again. Please, let's keep this between us, okay?" I pleaded, trying to gauge her response. Grace shrugged, her reply chilling. "I'm not promising anything, but it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow." Frustrated, I couldn't hold back. "Why do you always want me to fail?" I confronted her. Grace scoffed. "I just think you'd be better off as a housewife. It's less embarrassing than what you're doing now." Her words stung, and I felt my patience thin. "I don't have time for this, and I don't care what you think. Please just leave me alone so I can practice before Matthew gets home." With that, Grace finally left, but her unsettling smirk lingered in my mind long after she was gone. I stayed in the office a little while longer, processing everything before leaving to join Matthew when he got home. Throughout dinner, I couldn't shake the unease that her occasional smirks brought. Each one sent a ripple of anxiety through me, heightening my suspicion. Later that night, after Matthew and I had settled into our usual routine of watching a few episodes of our favorite show, I decided it was time to check the footage from the hidden camera in my office. As we watched, the screen showed nothing unusual until around midnight. That's when Grace stealthily entered the office. My heart raced as I hastily showed Matthew the live feed on my phone. At first, he was puzzled, but soon disbelief crossed his face as Grace tampered with my laptop, causing it to shut off and restart. Matthew's expression shifted from shock to anger as he realized what was happening. Meanwhile, the camera showed Grace rifling through my files. Unable to contain his frustration, Matthew stormed into the office, his footsteps heavy with fury. He burst through the door, startling Grace, who spun around, caught in the act. "What are you doing in here, Ma?" Matthew demanded, his voice strained as he tried to maintain his composure. "Oh, nothing really," Grace replied, feigning nonchalance. "Then why is Kelly's laptop open? Are you accusing me of going through her stuff?" Matthew pressed, his voice rising with suspicion. "I think you did more than just go through her laptop, Mom. Did you come here to tidy up at midnight? You know Kelly would never leave her laptop open like that," Matthew retorted, his frustration clear. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm still your mother," Grace snapped defensively. "Yeah, my mother who seems to enjoy hurting and sabotaging my wife," Matthew shot back, his voice unwavering. "We caught you on camera resetting Kelly's laptop. You were spying on me? That's disgusting. How could you film me without my consent?" Grace exclaimed, her indignation rising. "I didn't put cameras in your room," I interjected, stepping beside Matthew. "I installed one in my office. You went in there without permission." The confrontation had brought to light the extent of Grace's interference, and it was a defining moment for all of us, a test of both loyalty and trust. Despite her wrongdoing, Matthew stood firm in his decision. "Even if we did film you, it's nothing compared to what you've done to Kelly. I want you out of our house tomorrow," he declared resolutely. Grace's voice wavered with desperation. "But I'll be all alone." "I don't care, Mom. I don't want to talk to you right now," Matthew replied, his mind made up. The next morning, Grace attempted to stall her departure by making breakfast and washing dishes, hoping to buy more time. But Matthew wasn't swayed. As soon as she finished, he came downstairs with her bags already packed. "Your Uber's on its way," he informed her. Grace pleaded tearfully, a rare display of vulnerability from someone who typically brought others to tears. But Matthew, unmoved, retreated to our room, leaving me to face her alone. "You set me up," Grace lashed out, her voice trembling with accusation. I met her gaze calmly, though my words were firm. "If anyone should be yelling, it's me. You're lucky I haven't shared the footage with your friends and family. If they knew what you did, you'd lose them all." My words silenced her. After Grace's departure, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, though my job situation still weighed heavily on my mind. However, with Matthew's support, I knew I'd find my way forward. Once my notice period ended, I took some time off to rest and recalibrate. In the months that followed, I enrolled in specialized courses related to my field, honing in on a niche that could give me the edge I needed. My decision not to expose Grace was driven by a desire to rise above her pettiness and prove my capabilities on my own terms. With Matthew's family connections, I secured several promising recommendations, and with his unwavering support, I found the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. I was offered the role of chief editor at a globally recognized magazine. The work was demanding but incredibly fulfilling. As I threw myself into my new role, the need to prove myself to Grace faded into the background. In fact, during those transformative months, we had no contact with her at all. My journey to becoming chief editor wasn't just a professional victory, it was a personal liberation. I no longer needed to validate my worth to someone who had doubted me. Matthew, meanwhile, continued to maintain a professional relationship with his father, Larry, though we heard little about Grace. Larry hinted that she still harbored some resentment, but he kept the details to himself. Despite knowing that Grace hadn't completely let go of her bitterness, I was content. I had risen above her schemes, and I felt stronger for it. Yet deep down, I knew a confrontation with her was inevitable, especially given the unresolved tension that lingered in the background. When I found out that both Grace and Larry were attending a significant company event I'd be at. I braced myself. The party was a grand affair with prominent figures from various industries in attendance. Matthew and I made sure to look our best, fully aware of our own growing influence. As we arrived, we spotted Larry and Grace waving us over. We approached them, exchanging pleasantries, though Grace's eyes raked over me with a critical smirk. "Look at you, trying to fit in," she sneered. Ignoring her, Larry chimed in warmly, "Kelly, you look lovely as always." "Thanks, Larry. How have you been?" I asked, steering the conversation away from Grace's pettiness. "Yeah, how's unemployment treating you?" Grace cut in sharply. "Wait, you're unemployed?" Larry asked, genuinely surprised. "Oh, yes, she messed up at her job and they let her go. I've always said she's not good enough for our son. Look at her, she can't even keep a job." Grace mocked, her grin malicious. "That's enough, Mom," Matthew intervened, his tone firm. "Stop siding with her. It's bad enough having to see her everywhere. We wouldn't have to if you just left her, like I said," Grace insisted stubbornly. "All right, that's enough. Either you stop talking or I'm leaving," Matthew warned, his patience wearing thin. Larry, trying to ease the tension, smiled at me. "Kelly, sweetie, if you need a job, let me know. It would be great to work with you." "That's kind of you, Larry, but I'll have to pass," I replied graciously, though I appreciated his offer. Grace muttered under her breath, "Of course not. I told you she's lazy and incompetent." Just then, my name echoed through the room, followed by a wave of cheers. I turned to see the CEO motioning for me to come up to the small stage. Excusing myself, I left Grace and Larry behind, with Larry amused and Grace, for once, speechless. As I stepped onto the stage, the CEO began praising my contributions to the company, particularly my innovative ideas for the magazine. The room filled with applause, and I was soon invited to give a speech. Standing there, I thanked Matthew for his unwavering support and acknowledged the efforts of my colleagues, whose collaboration had been invaluable. I also subtly alluded to an unnamed critic whose skepticism had fueled my determination to excel. When I stepped off the stage, I was met with congratulations from various guests, many of whom were curious about the mysterious critic. I smiled, but kept that detail to myself. Returning to our table, Matthew greeted me with a proud embrace, and Larry offered his congratulations with a warm hug. Grace, however, could only manage a cold, disdainful glare. "Oh, Kelly, this is incredible. Now I see why you wouldn't want to work with us," Larry remarked, genuine admiration in his voice. "Thanks, Larry. Honestly, if you'd offered me a job 8 months ago, I might have taken it," I admitted, reflecting on how far I had come. "You should have. At least then you'd be paid more," Grace interjected sharply, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Paid more? I couldn't put a price on this," Larry countered, defending the intangible rewards of my current position. "Right, like she's worth that kind of money," Grace scoffed dismissively. "No, Grace, I mean I couldn't match what she's making right now," Larry clarified, hinting at my substantial earnings. Grace's face twisted in confusion. "What do you mean?" Larry turned to me, asking for permission. "Do you want me to tell her, Kelly? It might sound like boasting if I do." With a nod, I allowed him to reveal the truth. "Kelly makes at least 6 times more than I do in her current role," Larry said, his words leaving Grace visibly stunned. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "She must be making way more than Matthew, or I could have imagined," Grace muttered, her tone shifting from disbelief to reluctant acknowledgement. "That can't be right. You must be mistaken," she insisted, still struggling to grasp the reality. "He's not mistaken, Mom," Matthew interjected calmly. "And I meant it when I thanked you. Your constant criticism only pushed me to support Kelly even more. Seeing her success probably stings, doesn't it?" Grace's eyes narrowed, her anger barely concealed. I smiled politely. "Anyway, Matthew and I have other people to speak with. Grace, Larry, feel free to join us later," I said, making it clear we were moving on. Larry chuckled, raising his glass in a small toast to me as Matthew and I walked away. I felt more alive than ever, validated, triumphant, and grateful for Matthew's unwavering support through it all. Ever since we exchanged vows, my husband, a classic mama's boy, had been noticeably absent from household chores. His dependence on me became painfully clear when I mentioned an upcoming business trip. Panic set in as he exclaimed, "Who will take care of me while you're gone?" After a heated argument, I left for my week-long journey. When I returned, I found a note next to completed divorce papers. It read, "Since you abandoned the housework, I'm going back to my parents. Consider the divorce papers and think it over." Rage boiled inside me at his audacity to threaten divorce, but as I calmed down, I began to see a glimmer of clarity. Perhaps this was the push I needed. Maybe a divorce wasn't such a bad idea after all. Resolved, I filed the papers the very next day. The following morning, my astonished husband stormed in, demanding to know where the divorce papers were. When I told him I had filed them, he broke down, utterly baffled and crying uncontrollably. "My name is Grace, and at 32 years old, I've been married just over a year. After college, I diligently climbed the ranks at a prominent company. Approaching my 30s without a romantic partner, my parents pressured me to settle down, leading me to reluctantly join a dating agency. That's where I met Edward, a soft-spoken man a few years younger than me who worked at a mixed firm. We connected over several dates, and his respectful demeanor made me think he was the one. When he proposed, I was overjoyed, envisioning a life together. However, our marriage unveiled challenges I hadn't anticipated. After our engagement, during a visit to my parents, they impressed upon us that marriage is a lifelong commitment. "Grace, always be there for Edward," they advised, and I nodded while Edward listened intently. Next, we visited Edward's parents. His father, Arthur, welcomed me warmly, saying, "I've heard so much about you from my boy. It's great to finally meet you." His mother, Michelle, was more reserved, scrutinizing me before asking, "Is this the one?" Edward confidently replied, "Yep, Mommy. I want to marry her." I was taken aback by his use of Mommy and Michelle's bluntness. Arthur quickly stepped in, apologizing for her directness and assuring me, "We're very happy about your marriage, but just so you know, Edward has had it pretty easy here. He might be a bit of a challenge." I reassured them, "I adore Edward's gentle side, and I know we'll support each other." Arthur turned to Edward, urging him to step up and keep me happy. Edward nodded earnestly, and not long after, we celebrated our union with a low-key wedding. To our delight, my parents gifted us a condo, marking the beginning of our married life. However, it soon became evident that Edward was unaccustomed to household responsibilities. One morning, while I was busy with laundry and preparing breakfast, Edward's alarm rang at 8, yet he continued to sleep soundly. Despite my efforts to wake him, he wouldn't budge. Finally, I pulled off his covers and gave him a gentle shake. Slowly, he opened his eyes, groggily exclaiming, "Wow, it's 8:10 already. Why didn't you wake me up?" I reminded him that I had tried and that his alarm was blaring too. "Now please eat your breakfast." As he rubbed his eyes and shuffled to the table, he immediately complained about the eggs. "Hey Grace, this egg is too runny. I can't eat this unless it's well done. Make it over," he demanded, caught off guard while I hung laundry. I struggled to hold back my irritation and snapped, "Then don't eat it. Why would you say that? And this coffee is scorching hot. Mommy always got the eggs and coffee just right." All right, I sighed, quickly redoing the eggs and letting the coffee cool. He ate hurriedly, leaving his plate on the table as he rushed toward the restroom. "Wait up, you know you should clean up after yourself." I called after him, but he dismissed my concerns. "Gee, I'm short on time." Annoyed, I paused my makeup routine to clean the dishes while picking out my outfit. Then he called out again, "Grace, over here. Help with my tie." There he stood, tie hanging limp around his neck, looking utterly helpless. "Seriously, you can't even tie your tie? What did you do before we got married?" "Mommy always did it," he replied sheepishly. With a deep exhale, I tied his tie, and somehow we both managed to leave the house. This had become our routine. He never helped with any housework, and it felt like I was juggling everything while babysitting him too. Every time an issue arose, it was always, "Mommy did it this way," or "With Mommy, it went like that," always referencing his mother, Michelle. This pattern dragged on for a year, and as the pressures mounted, thoughts of divorce began to creep into my mind. My father's insistence that marriage is forever echoed in my thoughts, tempering my frustrations. However, an unexpected hiccup at work led to a week-long business trip starting the next day. When I broke the news to my husband that evening, he paused his video game, clearly surprised. "Hold up, a business trip for a whole week? It's out of my hands. Work's calling," I explained. "No way. Who's going to cover for you here for a week?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "You'll have to step up. It's about time you got a grip on the household duties." I responded, and he set down his controller, locking eyes with me. Isn't the wife supposed to care for her husband in the house? Are you just bailing on that? His question was steeped in outdated expectations. Seriously, that's such old school thinking. We both have jobs, we should be a team, I countered. That's not how I see it. Mommy was always on top of things at home, he retorted. I couldn't help but point out, but she was a stay-at-home mom. Honestly, it's kind of odd hearing an adult man constantly talk about mommy. He bristled at my words. What's your deal? Taking shots at me and my mommy? I'm not, but let's be real, you're a mama's boy. This is how you see me. You think you can talk to me like that? His defensiveness escalated, and I felt my frustration peak. Face it, you're a mama's boy. You can't get up without help, you can't even tie your tie, and you won't lift a finger around the house. You're constantly comparing me to your mom. For once, handle your stuff. Really? You're going to come at me like that? That's why I was iffy about marrying someone older. Should have sided with mommy and chosen a younger, perkier girl, he shot back. His words struck a nerve, and our conversation spiraled into a major blowout. Even joking, you shouldn't say stuff like that. We're married, I said, trying to anchor the conversation to the commitment we had made to each other. The tension was palpable, revealing the deep rifts that had formed in our relationship. When my husband hinted at divorce during our heated argument, I was taken aback. With a smug tone, he challenged, "You can't possibly want a divorce, can you? You wouldn't want to be labeled divorced. And think about what your dad said about sticking together." Then, with a sharp edge, he added, "Well, I just did. If you go on this business trip and leave me here alone, I'm seriously considering a divorce." With those words, he stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me stunned. Despite the shock, the idea of divorce lingered in my mind, a thought I had previously wrestled with, fearing I would disappoint my parents. But now it seemed like a viable option to consider seriously. Heavy with these thoughts, I went to bed. The next day, I woke early to prepare for my trip. The fallout from our argument still weighed heavily on me, but I had work commitments to attend to. I nudged Edward, who was still curled up under the covers. "I'm heading out. You'd better wake up or you'll be late for work." His response was a sleepy mumble, unintelligible and dismissive. Rolling my eyes, I left. A few hours later, a text from him popped up on my phone. "You barely tried to wake me. Now I'm running late. Did you really go on that trip?" I quickly replied, "I did wake you up, and yes, I'm on my trip. I'll be back in a week." He read my message but didn't reply. Mid-trip, I decided to call my parents to update them on Edward's behavior and share my growing inclination toward divorce. I braced myself for a lecture, unsure how they would react to the possibility of our marriage ending. The call was going to be difficult, but I needed their advice and support. Their response took me by surprise. "We had no idea he behaved like this. Take your time to think, but don't force yourself to stay in a situation that isn't right. Always remember, we're in your corner, no matter what you decide." Their words of unconditional support brought tears to my eyes. Upon returning from my business trip, I felt a mix of clarity and determination. I knew a serious conversation with Edward was inevitable. If he didn't show any signs of change, I was ready to consider divorce more seriously. My mind buzzed with thoughts as I walked into our house late in the evening, only to find Edward wasn't home yet. As I looked around, a set of signed divorce papers and a note on the table caught my attention. The note read, "Since you ditched the housework, I'm heading back to my folks. Check out the divorce papers and think things over." My initial reaction was rage. How dared he threaten me with divorce? But as my anger subsided, I began to see the situation differently. Maybe this was a sign that ending things might not be such a bad idea after all. With that realization, I decided to file the papers. When the divorce was finalized, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. That evening, I went to bed and slept more soundly than I had in a long time. The next morning, as I enjoyed a peaceful cup of coffee, the door swung open and in walked Edward, clearly upset. "Why didn't you come to my parents' place to apologize? What's gotten into you?" he demanded, his temper flaring. Then, noticing the empty spot where the divorce papers had been, his expression shifted from anger to shock. "Hold on, where are the divorce papers?" "Oh, I filed them," I replied calmly. "You did what?" He looked as if he had been slapped. "You went through with it. Thanks for signing them. It made everything smoother," I said, trying to keep my composure. You can't be serious. Did you really go all the way? Have you lost your mind? He exclaimed, unable to hide his astonishment at my decisiveness. Seeing how composed I remained sent him into a complete frenzy. That's it. I'm calling my parents. Sure, knock yourself out, I replied, unfazed by his threat. I knew I had made the right decision for myself. An hour after the confrontation, I felt a sense of clarity settling in. When Edward's parents, Michelle and Arthur, arrived at our apartment, Michelle immediately spotted me and dramatically exclaimed, "You! How could you just divorce Edward like that? What's wrong with you?" I replied coolly, "If he had the divorce papers all filled out and ready to go, doesn't that suggest he wanted out? Is that a problem? How can you be so bold when you're just his wife?" She shot back. Before the situation could escalate, Arthur intervened, his voice firm. "Enough." The room fell silent as he turned to me. "Grace, can you walk us through what happened?" I agreed and began to detail the ongoing issues, our argument before my trip, and the divorce papers Edward had left for me. I was at my wit's end. It seemed like he wanted a divorce, so I went with it. I maintained eye contact with Arthur, hoping to convey the depth of my frustration. Just as I finished, Edward interjected, "Mom, Dad, come on, can't you see she's out of line? Tell her off." Michelle quickly sided with Edward. "Oh, Edward, my poor baby, she's being so hasty. You should reverse the divorce right now." "There's no reversing it. Our divorce is final. We're strangers now," I stated firmly. Michelle's face turned red, and she opened her mouth to respond. But once again, Arthur cut her off. "Zip it, Michelle." He then turned to me, apologizing for Edward's behavior. Then facing Edward, whose eyes were wide with surprise, Arthur continued, "You bonehead. I knew you had issues, but this, using divorce papers as a threat, unbelievable. You had it coming." Michelle tried to interject, but Arthur wouldn't let up. "It's partly on you, Michelle. You spoiled him. Watch out. If you keep this up, I might divorce you too." The tension in the room was palpable as Arthur confronted the reality of the situation, leaving Edward and Michelle speechless. After the intense discussion, Michelle appeared visibly shaken, her mind lingering on Arthur's unexpected threat of divorce. She murmured to herself, troubled. Arthur then turned his attention back to me, his expression marked by sincere regret. "Grace, I deeply regret the trouble our clueless son has caused you. It's clear he has a lot to learn. Please move on and find happiness in your life," Arthur implored, his concern genuine. I thanked Arthur for his understanding and watched as he left, taking a dejected Edward with him. It didn't take long for the news to spread through our circle. Arthur had decided to sever financial and emotional ties with Edward, a drastic move aimed at pushing him towards self-sufficiency. Soon after, Edward's life spiraled downward. He moved into a modest, somewhat neglected apartment, his first experience living truly on his own. The transition was anything but smooth. His new home quickly descended into chaos, mirroring his disorganized personal life. With no one to rely on and a habit of tardiness, he soon found himself unemployed, unable to adhere to a schedule. Meanwhile, the dynamics within his family deteriorated further. Michelle, who had always meddled in Edward's affairs, crossed boundaries one too many times, resulting in a serious fallout with Arthur. This ultimately led to their separation. Michelle moved in with Edward, and together they struggled to find stability, scraping by with low-end jobs. Their lives became a series of unfortunate events and poor decisions with no clear path to improvement. In stark contrast, my life took a different turn. Free from the daily stresses and emotional drain of my relationship with Edward, I found myself alone in our condo, which now felt surprisingly spacious and full of potential. With renewed energy and focus, I dedicated myself to my career. The absence of Edward's negative influence allowed me to excel at work, and my professional life flourished as a result. Feeling liberated and optimistic, I embraced my newfound independence. My living space transformed into a true sanctuary where I could relax and plan for the future. The improvement in my work life was palpable. Each day brought a sense of excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. The contrast between my thriving existence and Edward and Michelle's downward trajectory was stark. While they were no longer a part of my life, the lessons learned from our time together resonated deeply, reinforcing my commitment to personal growth and happiness. When I married Jerry, I was fortunate to inherit some real estate from my grandparents. They advised me to use it wisely to secure our future, but also suggested I keep it confidential, even from Jerry. They believed it was prudent to maintain a passive income that only I controlled, ensuring I'd always have financial security. Unfortunately, Jerry has a habit of overstepping boundaries, particularly regarding possessions and finances. For instance, he once tried to redistribute gifts I had bought for my parents, giving them to his parents to enhance his image. His actions troubled me, especially when he reacted poorly to being confronted about them. Recently, a much more alarming incident occurred. I discovered $22,000 had been withdrawn from an account I managed, intended for our living expenses. This account was meant to complement the income Jerry contributed to our household, and I had no recollection of making such a large withdrawal. The only possible explanation was that Jerry had taken the money. When I confronted him, he nonchalantly admitted that he had lent the funds to his mother, Kayla, who was going through some difficulties. He did this without informing or consulting me. The revelation was shocking, not just because of the large sum involved, but also because it demonstrated a lack of communication and respect for our mutual financial decisions. This incident made me rethink the dynamics of our relationship. If our marriage isn't built on mutual respect and transparency, especially regarding finances, it may be time to reconsider our future together. The assumption that one spouse's earnings automatically belong to the other without any discussion is not a sustainable way to manage a marriage. If this approach continues, we may need to face the possibility of separation. Although the money was originally mine, earned through hard work, and we still have some savings, the loss isn't financially catastrophic. If Kayla was truly facing difficulties, I understand the need to help. However, I would have appreciated a simple conversation beforehand. The account is ours after all. If Jerry had taken the money from a personal account he set up before our marriage, I wouldn't have been as upset. But withdrawing such a large sum from our shared account without discussion felt like a breach of trust. When I expressed my disappointment, Jerry seemed irritated and dismissed my concerns. He promised, albeit reluctantly, to inform me next time before making any major financial decisions. Then, he excused himself to the bathroom, leaving me feeling unsettled. It wasn't like the early days of our marriage when Jerry would genuinely listen and value my input. Is this what change in a marriage looks like? A few days later, I visited my in-laws to deliver a package that had mistakenly been sent to our address. My mother-in-law, Amy, greeted me warmly and invited me in for tea. Though I had planned just to drop off the package, I accepted. While there, I noticed several luxurious items around the house: expensive cosmetics, stylish clothing, and health products. Amy mentioned, almost casually, that these were all gifts from Jerry. The realization hit me hard. The missing $22,000 had been used not out of necessity, but for extravagant purchases. The idea that Jerry had lent money to his mother for emergencies suddenly seemed like a gross exaggeration. This misuse of funds made me question not only our financial partnership but also the respect and communication in our marriage. As I sat there quietly sipping my tea, the atmosphere shifted. My in-laws' smiles faded, and they began to look at me with a strange mix of fear and accusation. Amy's tone turned confrontational as she remarked, "My son is such a wonderful, generous boy, always buying gifts for me. But what about you? As his wife, are you taking good care of my wonderful son? There seems to be some trouble. I heard from Jerry that you've been giving him a hard time for using the money to help me." It became clear that Jerry had portrayed himself as a victim to his parents, a good son, simply helping his mother in need. This explained their fearful and defensive attitude toward me. The revelation drained the last bit of patience I had, not only with my in-laws but with Jerry as well. I never expected such a lack of support and understanding in my marriage, and the thought of divorce started to feel like a real possibility. I began envisioning a post-divorce future where I would move back into my parents' home. It was a two-story house, over 32 years old, built before my brother was born. It had once comfortably housed our family of 5, but now it stood mostly empty, becoming impractical for my aging parents who struggled with mobility. Although the house had been modified with handrails, its spacious layout was more of a challenge than a comfort. A one-story home would be far more suitable for their needs. With the financial security from my passive income, I realized I could rebuild their home into something more comfortable and accessible for them. This idea filled me with both resolve and relief. So I called my parents to discuss not only my decision to divorce but also my plan to renovate their house. Surprisingly, my parents weren't shocked by the news of the divorce. Their calm reaction solidified my decision. It seemed they understood my need for a fresh start. When I brought up the idea of reconstructing their home, I could hear genuine joy in their voices. "We're so glad you're thinking of rebuilding the house for us." "Thank you," they said. They reassured me that even if they couldn't live there for much longer, it wouldn't be an issue since I could eventually take over the house, which would be funded by my own income. "Well, I'll start planning it bit by bit," I replied, feeling encouraged by their support. "Just take it easy and don't overdo it," they advised, their words instantly lifting my spirits as I began organizing the rebuild of my parents' home. It felt like the start of something new, a fresh chapter not only for them but for me as well. I had been waiting for a response from the construction company when Jerry suddenly confronted me, his anger palpable. "How dare you use our savings to build a house without telling me anything about it?" he accused, slamming his fist on the living room table. His voice grew louder, completely disregarding my feelings. "My parents will be living in the new house," I said firmly, trying to keep my composure. "That's impossible," Jerry roared, his face reddening. "That house was built for my parents to live in." He insisted that since he viewed the funds as our shared property, his parents had as much right to the house as mine. "Are you seriously planning to cram 5 people into that tiny one-story house? Just give me the house," he demanded, banging the table harder with every word. Fearing how much worse his reaction would be if he discovered the truth about the passive income I had kept secret, I realized it was time to reveal everything. "To tell you the truth, I have passive income," I confess, feeling the weight of my grandparents' trust. "It's from the real estate my grandparents gifted me, and I used that income to pay for the rebuild. Not a single penny came from our shared savings." The guilt of breaking my grandparents' promise to keep this secret gnawed at me, but I had no choice. As I spoke, Jerry's anger escalated. His face twisted in fury, his shoulders shaking, and his fists slammed the table even harder. "What kind of wife hides an income from her husband? You spend my money but protect your own with secrets," he shouted, his words cutting deep. His reaction clarified everything that had gone wrong in our marriage: lack of trust, respect, and any sense of partnership. The issues had been festering beneath the surface for too long, and now they were impossible to ignore. "I'll take the house as alimony," Jerry sneered, his arrogance shocking me. "Any house built while we're married is mine too. I'm the head of the family, and if you disobey me, I'll divorce you." I stared at him in disbelief. How had I spent so many years with a man who could so easily dismiss my feelings, my contributions? The passive income had been meant as a safeguard for our future. If his earnings fell short or if something happened that left me unable to work, it was meant to protect both of us, not drive a wedge between us. Now, I saw clearly that my grandparents had been right to advise me to keep it a secret. They must have seen something in Jerry long before I did. I had planned to share my passive income with Jerry when the time was right, but after everything, I no longer felt any desire to use that money on him. Frustrated, I stood up and left the house, needing space from the suffocating atmosphere. I spent the night at a business hotel to clear my head and think through my next steps. When I returned home the next morning, Jerry was waiting for me with a sly, unsettling smile. He smirked as he approached, holding a sheet of paper he'd been hiding behind his back, divorce papers already filled out. "You're lying about your passive income, aren't you?" he sneered. "You made that up to cover for stealing from our common savings." His baseless accusations were tiresome despite my honesty about the passive income I had from my grandparents. No matter how much I insisted on the truth, Jerry was stuck in his own narrative, refusing to believe me. "It's the truth. I have passive income," I said once more, but I could see he wasn't interested in listening. His inability to trust or respect me was the final straw. It became painfully clear that this marriage offered none of the support or partnership I needed. The path forward was now inevitable. With a smug grin, Jerry shoved the divorce papers into my hand and said, "You'll let me know when my parents can move into the house, right?" He patted me on the shoulder, as if this was all some joke, then walked out the door, humming as he mentioned he was off for a drink. In that moment, everything clicked. Jerry had been concealing his disdain for me throughout our marriage. He had never truly valued my feelings or respected my perspective. The realization stung, but it also brought clarity and freedom. I didn't hesitate. I packed my things right then and there, filled out the divorce papers, and left the house for good. I moved in with my parents temporarily, explaining the situation to them. We agreed I would stay with them until the new house was completed. The next day, I noticed my phone flooded with missed calls from Jerry. When he called again, I decided to answer, hoping it would be our final conversation. "How? Hey, all your stuff is gone," he said impatiently, sounding confused by my actions. What's going on? Why was he panicking? He had pushed for the divorce after all. "We're getting divorced, Jerry," I replied calmly. "It's normal that I wouldn't stay. I will be coming back, so feel free to use the empty space however you like." There was a pause on the other end. Maybe for the first time, Jerry realized that I had resources he couldn't control. Then suddenly his tone shifted. His voice became unusually sweet, a side of him I had never heard before. "Hey, would you let my parents live in the new house?" he asked, almost pleading. I hung up without a second thought. I finally moved on. "I don't care if I have to live with your parents. Please." Jerry's please stunned me. "I already told you, it's a small one-story house," I reminded him, incredulous. "And it's meant as a surprise for my parents." His suggestion was absurd. Not only was he proposing to give away a house he hadn't contributed to, but he spoke as though it was his to offer. His reckless disregard for reality left me speechless. "You don't care about the savings, do you?" Jerry continued, oblivious to my growing frustration. "You have no idea how much I worried about the money I set aside for you as an allowance, and the funds I saved for our living expenses." This conversation only solidified my decision. Jerry's understanding of our finances and our relationship was completely skewed. Moving forward without him was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. I explained to him the efforts I had put into managing our finances, how I had struggled to make ends meet, but he brushed it off, dismissing the significance of my sacrifices. "That has nothing to do with what's happening here," he said coldly. "You're careless with money, leaving the hassle to other people. And now you're presenting yourself to your parents like you did everything on your own." I confronted him, pointing out how he always tried to take credit for my hard work. His sudden silence only intensified my frustration. It became clear he was trying to paint himself as the mastermind behind everything, wanting to gift the house I built for my parents to his own, capitalizing on my sincerity just to impress them. His behavior was shallow, deceptive, and utterly insulting. "In the end, you're just trying to take advantage of my goodwill and claim what isn't yours," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "There is no justification for trampling on my feelings and intentions like this. I will not give you the house I built with all my heart for my parents just so you can show off." Jerry grew louder, perhaps out of desperation. "Husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. I'll tell them you built it, please. We're not a married couple anymore, are we?" I cut him off. "We're strangers now. I already filed for divorce, remember?" His face fell, realizing that the boundaries I had drawn were final. On the day Jerry handed me those divorce papers, he may have thought he was in control, but now he knew otherwise. I submitted the divorce papers to the city office immediately. Jerry had been the one pushing for it, but when faced with the reality of our separation, he seemed stunned. "You already filed? Why are you so surprised when you're the one who asked for the divorce?" I asked, incredulous. "Oh, I didn't think you'd actually leave me. Hey, let's start over. We can talk it out and be a good couple this time," he pleaded, as if unaware of the gravity of his actions. How could he say such a thing now? This was a man who had squandered our savings on his mother, threatened me with divorce, and ridiculed me to the bitter end. Reconciliation was out of the question. "No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents," I said brightly before ending the call. The next day, my phone was flooded with voicemails and messages from Jerry, still demanding that we get back together. His persistence was baffling and completely unwelcome. His repeated attempts to reconcile only affirmed my decision to move on. Jerry claimed we could start over and that he loved me, but I sensed his real interest was in my property and fortune, not in our relationship. To sever ties completely, I blocked all contact from him and his parents. Meanwhile, the construction of the new house was finished and my parents and I moved in. We now live comfortably in the home I built, surrounded by peace and contentment. Sometime later, I ran into a mutual friend who also knew Jerry, and I shared the news of our divorce. My friend offered kind words and updated me on Jerry's situation. It turned out that Jerry had abruptly quit his job. claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. When his company couldn't reach him, they were left scrambling. The next day, Jerry tried to retract his resignation, but his bosses, frustrated by his sudden disappearance, demanded an explanation. Unable to admit that he had been banking on my income, Jerry lied about his circumstances. Eventually, the truth about our divorce came out, and his lies were exposed. His company refused to rehire him, realizing he had tried to manipulate the situation for his gain. Ironically, the man who once scoffed at my passive income, suggesting it was a lie, now found himself in a precarious position. He returned to live with his parents, who were understandably upset. He's now struggling to find a new job, his reputation marred by his dubious exit from his last employment. As for me, life has moved forward in a positive direction. I'm living with my parents in the house I built, working a job I love, and enjoying life. The passive income I had once saved for our future together will now be used to support the people who have always stood by me. This turn of events has brought me a renewed sense of peace, and it's clear that moving on was the best decision for my well-being. At the age of 12, my life changed dramatically when my family moved from Kenya to Canada. This transition opened up a vibrant new world filled with exciting opportunities, diverse cultures, and welcoming people. My father's success as a businessman ensured we enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, making it easier to adapt to our new surroundings. During high school, I met Russell, the person who would later become my husband. Our relationship had its share of ups and downs over the years, but by the time I turned 22, we decided to take the leap and get married. I was ecstatic, envisioning a future filled with love and happiness. However, one significant hurdle lay ahead: Russell's mother, Doris, who was openly opposed to our marriage plans. I couldn't shake the feeling that her objections were partly rooted in my Kenyan heritage. Doris often made subtle, unsettling comments that left me feeling unwelcome. In contrast, Russell remained unfazed by the tension. He cherished our relationship and valued me for who I was rather than my background. Despite his mother's disapproval, he consistently affirmed his commitment to us. Our wedding day was emotionally complex. While I was thrilled to marry Russell, the shadow of Doris's disapproval loomed over us. Determined to focus on our love, I tried to ignore the negativity. In the days that followed, Doris's disdain became more pronounced. She frequently made disparaging remarks about my culture, which was painful. Despite my desire for a harmonious relationship with her, it seemed increasingly unattainable. Russell attempted to bridge the gap between us, promising to address the issues with his mother. Torn between his love for both Doris and me, he did his best to mediate, but the atmosphere remained tense. Doris's continuous jabs and intrusive questions about my background were disheartening and began to take a toll on my mental health. Despite these challenges, Russell and I focused on building our life together, moving into our own place, and pursuing our careers. However, Doris's persistent disapproval cast a shadow over our happiness, leading to a point where her remarks became unbearable. I had always prided myself on staying calm and treating everyone with kindness, but eventually Doris's hurtful comments pushed me too far. In a moment of frustration, I raised my voice for the first time. "Doris, I've truly had enough of your incessant comments. They're tiresome." "Oh, I'm just expressing my opinions. There's no need for you to be so defensive," she replied. "It feels like you're relentlessly targeting me because of my background. I deserve the same respect as anyone else. I'm not trying to offend, but you seem overly sensitive about everything." "This isn't about sensitivity, it's about respect. I am your daughter-in-law and should be treated with kindness and understanding. Perhaps if you tried to fit in a bit more, I wouldn't need to make these remarks." Fit in. I've been part of this community for years. This is my home, too. I shouldn't have to alter who I am just to appease you. And just so you know, I never sought your permission to marry your son, nor did I wish for it. I know you had different plans for him. That's unfair. We love each other, and that should matter to you. If only you were from a more traditional background, perhaps I'd be more accepting. I don't need your acceptance. I take immense pride in my heritage and refuse to let you belittle me for it. Your prejudice is your burden to bear. Well, maybe things would have been simpler if you'd married someone from your own culture. That's irrelevant. We are married, and you need to accept that. Your ongoing disapproval is causing us pain, and I won't allow you to dampen our happiness. I never expected you to speak to me like this. Why are you being so aggressive? Perhaps you never anticipated that I would stand up for myself. I'm done trying to please you. If this is how you feel, it might be best for us to keep our distance." "That suits me just fine," she replied. "I deserve to be surrounded by people who respect and appreciate me for who I am." "You're being unreasonable." "No, I'm simply tired of being mistreated. I'm part of your family now, whether you like it or not, and it's time you start treating me that way. If you can't manage that, then maybe it's better for us to maintain some space." "Suit yourself," she said coldly. "I will, and I hope you take some time to reflect on how your actions affect your relationship with your son," I retorted, deciding it was time to leave. "Perhaps when you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve, we can talk again. Until then, take care." I left the room, feeling a tumultuous mix of anger and sadness. Confronting Doris had been difficult, but standing up for myself was necessary. From that moment, I knew our relationship might be irreparably damaged. Yet I felt confident in my decision. I deserved respect and would no longer tolerate subtle jabs or hurtful comments. My focus had to remain on my marriage and building the joyful life with Russell, regardless of Doris's disapproval. When I shared the details of our confrontation with Russell, he surprised me with his unwavering support. He even told his mother that she needed to treat me with respect. However, the situation escalated dramatically when Doris threatened to disown him, shocking both of us. I could see the pain in Russell's eyes. His mother's willingness to cut him off for defending his wife was heartbreaking. Yet this difficult situation helped us realize something crucial. We didn't need toxic people in our lives, even if they were family. We deserve love and respect, and if someone couldn't provide that, they didn't deserve a place in our lives. As hard as it was to witness Doris's behavior, it served as a wake-up call for Russell. He began to understand that his mother's negativity and disapproval were holding him back from true happiness. It was time for him to move beyond the toxicity and build a life with me based on love and mutual understanding. Months passed since Doris cut ties with us. Although Russell was deeply affected by his mother's decision, he still missed her despite everything she had said and done. I went to support him in finding closure, hoping to pave the way for potential reconciliation. I planned a dinner date at Russell's favorite restaurant, hoping it would bring him some comfort and perhaps signal a new beginning for us. When we arrived and I gave my name, the host looked puzzled and informed me that my name was on the blacklist. I was taken aback. Russell and I had always been regular patrons. Confused and eager to clear up this misunderstanding, I requested to speak with the manager. To our astonishment, the manager emerged, revealing herself to be none other than Doris. During the months we hadn't seen her, she had taken on a new role. Managing this very restaurant, Applebee's, our favorite spot, it felt too calculated to be a mere coincidence, and a wave of shock and disbelief washed over me at her pettiness. Well, what do we have here? I never thought I'd see the day when you two would show up at my restaurant. Doris greeted us, not missing a beat as she informed us that we were not welcome. Russell's frustration bubbled over, and he began to raise his voice, drawing the attention of other diners. I felt torn, wanting to support him while also trying to prevent the situation from escalating further. "Doris, we didn't come here to cause trouble. We just wanted to enjoy a peaceful dinner." I tried to reason with her. "We just want a peaceful dinner." "A peaceful dinner with the likes of you? I don't think so. It's quite amusing to see you both here, practically begging to be let in after everything that's happened," Doris retorted smugly. "What are you talking about, Mom? We've always loved this place. Now you're saying we're not welcome?" Russell asked, incredulous. "It's quite simple. When he chose to marry her against my wishes, I had to make a decision. I couldn't allow my son to make such a dreadful mistake, so I decided to protect my business from your poor choices," Doris explained coldly. "You're sick, Mom. It's disgusting that you're doing this on purpose just to spite us," Russell accused, his voice filled with dismay. "Oh please, Russell. I'm just looking out for my reputation. I can't have people like you associating with my business." Doris dismissed him. "This is ridiculous. Mom, you're choosing your bigotry over your son. I thought you were better than this," Russell lamented, hurt evident in his voice. "You're the one who chose this path. Don't blame me for the decisions you've made," Doris shot back sharply. As she spoke, all eyes in the restaurant were fixed on us, casting an uncomfortable spotlight on the confrontation. It was deeply embarrassing to be escorted out of Applebee's, a place we had once enjoyed so freely. "Let's just leave. Arguing won't change her mind," I suggested quietly, eager to escape the escalating tension. You're right, Janice. It's not worth it, Russell replied, disappointment etched on his face. And don't come back. No one wants you here, Doris called after us, her voice dripping with disdain. Once outside, we wandered aimlessly down the street. Russell was clearly upset, so I encouraged him to open up about his feelings, especially regarding Applebee's. Let it all out, Russell. How are you really feeling? I know this place meant more to you than just a restaurant. Applebee's was where my dad and I bonded. We'd sit by the window, order our favorite meals, and just talk for hours about everything. It's where we connected, he explained, his voice heavy with loss. That sounds so meaningful, and I can't believe Doris would use it to hurt you like this. Especially knowing how much those moments with your dad meant to you. It's just so unfair. She knows how special Applebee's is to me, and yet she chose to use it against us just because she doesn't approve of our marriage. You deserve so much better than this, Russell. I wish I could fix this. It's awful to see someone trying to dismantle what we have. I always thought family was meant to support each other, not tear one another apart, Russell said, frustration etched on his face. It's tough to make sense of why she acts this way, but sometimes people let their biases get the best of them. We might not be able to change that, but we can choose how we respond, I reassured him. You're right. I'm done letting her negativity affect us. What matters is that we have each other. Exactly. We'll face this together. And actually, I have some news that might brighten your day a bit, I said, trying to shift the mood. What's that? He asked, curiosity piqued despite the somber atmosphere. Well, it turns out my dad recently acquired the entire block of buildings on this street, including Applebee's, I revealed. Really? Why didn't you mention this before? It just happened. He finalized the deal with the investors recently, and I was still grappling with how everything would unfold. I had planned to share the news during a celebratory dinner at the restaurant. That's incredible, Janice. I need to congratulate him later, Russell said, genuinely impressed. We can do that later, but right now we need to address your mom, I replied, steering the conversation back to the pressing issue. My dad is quite formidable in business matters, and he won't take kindly to how Doris treated us. He's going to handle this situation. Feeling a mix of urgency and determination, I decided to call my dad and put him on speakerphone so Russell could listen in. I explained everything that had transpired at Applebee's. My dad was upset by the news. I knew Doris wasn't fond of you, but to kick you out of a restaurant, that's a new low. I'm sorry I hadn't reviewed the documents sooner. I only just received the title deeds for this property and hadn't had the chance to evaluate all the managers yet. But rest assured, I'll take care of this immediately. Don't worry at all. Give me 20 minutes and I'll be there to sort this out personally, he assured us. Hearing my dad's determined words brought me a sense of relief, though it was tinged with concern about what might unfold next. I knew my dad was more than capable of handling the situation, but I hoped it wouldn't escalate into something messier. He wasn't someone to be trifled with, especially in business, and he firmly believed in treating customers with fairness and compassion. So Russell and I waited nervously outside Applebee's, trusting that my dad would resolve the issue appropriately. We weren't exactly sure what he planned to do, but we believed in his judgment. Moments later, my dad arrived, walking with a confident stride that suggested he was ready to take on whatever needed to be done. As he entered, he called out for Doris, his voice carrying enough weight for everyone inside to hear. The tension in the restaurant was palpable as heads turned to watch the unfolding scene. Doris stepped forward, visibly annoyed by the interruption. She probably thought she could dismiss my father just as easily as she had dismissed us. But he wasn't one to be brushed aside lightly. He raised an eyebrow at her and began with a tone of faux concern. Doris, my dear, it seems you haven't been keeping up with the latest developments. Did they forget to inform you about the new owner of the 2nd Green Avenue complex? Doris appeared visibly shaken, clearly caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events. What are you talking about? Who is it? She stammered, confusion lacing her voice. My dad couldn't suppress a small knowing smile. Well, that would be me. I'm the new owner, and I must say, I've been here for less than a week and I'm already receiving troubling complaints about your management. Doris's complexion turned a shade paler as the reality of her predicament sank in. I didn't know that, she muttered, flustered. Well, perhaps if you had checked your emails or paid closer attention to what's happening around you, you might have known. But it's too late for apologies now, my dad replied with a chuckle. It was satisfying to see Doris on the receiving end of the treatment she had dished out to us. Russell, who had been quietly seething by my side, stepped forward with resolve. "You had no right to treat us, or anyone, the way you did, especially Janice. We've always known you harbored ill will, but as someone in charge of a public establishment, you should have been the first to understand that discrimination based on personal prejudices is unacceptable. You've clearly violated that principle, and I don't think you're fit to manage this place." Now, desperate, Doris pleaded, "Wait, I'm sorry." I pointed out to Doris, "Even if you didn't know he was the owner, you should have treated all customers fairly without letting your personal biases interfere. Please, let's discuss this privately." Doris attempted to salvage the situation. "There's no need," my dad interjected, his voice ringing loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think everyone here would be interested to know that the person managing Applebee's, who allowed her racism to interfere with her professional duties, is no longer part of the staff." The murmurs in the restaurant grew louder, fueled by the unfolding drama. Doris, utterly embarrassed, could only stand in silence as the reality of her actions sank in. Russell and I watched, relieved that justice was being served. We felt a surge of relief and triumph, finally receiving some reparation after enduring Doris's harsh treatment for so long. My dad decisively handled the situation, warning her that he would call security to escort her out if she didn't leave voluntarily. Embarrassed and on the brink of tears, Doris began her walk of shame out of the restaurant. As she made her exit, the mood in the room instantly lifted. People began to clap and cheer, celebrating her departure. A profound sense of relief washed over me. Russell and I immediately went over to my dad, giving him a big hug to thank him for his decisive intervention. "You're the best, Dad," I said with a smile. He chuckled, giving us both a reassuring pat on the back. "It was my pleasure, my dear. I couldn't stand by and watch you two suffer because of her." Dad excused himself to check on the kitchen staff and find the next in command to appoint as the acting manager in the wake of the upheaval. He returned shortly after, explaining that he had important business matters to finalize, including formally terminating Doris and organizing the paperwork for the new acting manager. "Okay, my work here is done for now. You two enjoy your meal in the house," he said, signaling for us to take a seat and relax. As we settled down at a table, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped me. I was still processing how swiftly everything had escalated. Above all, I felt incredibly grateful for my dad's support and the strength he provided during this challenging time. It was comforting to know that no matter what happened, we had someone on our side, ready to step in when needed. On the day we were set to embark on our honeymoon, I was blindsided when Daniel handed me divorce papers instead. He announced, with a chilling detachment, that he was taking his entire family on what was supposed to be our trip. Coldly, he added, "If you have a problem with it, we can just go our separate ways." Internally, I was fuming, but I kept my composure and calmly responded, "Fine, but don't forget, I'm still my own person." His shocked expression gave me a fleeting sense of victory. "My name is Samantha. I'm 37 years old, and I work in real estate, a career I genuinely love and find fulfilling. I'm fortunate to have supportive colleagues, but despite my professional success, my personal life feels stagnant. I don't have any hobbies, and I've never had a boyfriend before Daniel." A growing concern had been weighing on me as I watched most of my friends marry in their 30s. I was one of the few still single, and it didn't help that my younger colleagues were progressively leaving the company, which left me with a pang of loneliness. Then, through a mutual friend, I met Daniel. He was 3 years younger than me, with a comforting smile that immediately drew me in. He didn't talk much. He preferred to listen, but he always made sure my opinions were valued whenever decisions had to be made. Having no prior experience in relationships, I quickly grew attached to him. As our relationship evolved, I brought up the idea of marriage, and Daniel agreed without hesitation. Marriage is a huge commitment. It's planning a wedding, a honeymoon, building a new home together. I was eager for us to make these decisions jointly, but Daniel always deferred to me, never sharing his preferences. Over time, this made him feel distant, less reliable. My dissatisfaction with him began to grow, especially when his mother came into the picture. Daniel's mother was nothing like him. Where he was easygoing, she was overbearing, rarely considering my views and often imposing her own. "Samantha, once you're married, you'll quit your job and focus on the home, right? You're not getting any younger. If you wait too long, you'll have trouble having kids," she remarked during one of our first meetings. Daniel is working hard, so as a woman, you should concentrate on the family. It's a wife's duty to support her husband. She adhered to such outdated beliefs. Ironically, I earned more than Daniel, something he didn't mind but had mentioned to his parents. His mother, however, looked down on this. A woman who earns more than a man isn't charming. Can you even manage household chores? A wife should cook, do laundry, clean, and take care of her husband's health. Can you do that? She challenged, clearly underestimating me. Contrary to her assumptions, I had been living independently for years, managing all my household tasks without any issue. I had no intention of quitting my job after marriage either. I wanted to maintain a balance between my personal and professional life, but whenever his mother criticized me, Daniel remained silent. He didn't defend me, just nodded along with her. This planted seeds of doubt about his ability to stand up for me or be a reliable partner. His lack of support left me feeling uneasy about our future. I questioned whether I could truly rely on him when it mattered. Despite him being younger, I had hoped he might grow into a more dependable partner with time. But a part of me feared that if this marriage didn't work, I might never get married at all. My mind was in constant turmoil, torn between anxiety and longing, all while time moved forward without mercy. As the wedding preparations continued, from selecting a honeymoon destination to figuring out time off from work, my to-do list only grew, adding to my mounting unease. It was as if the more I tried to move forward, the heavier the weight of everything became. One day, I decided to discuss our plans with Daniel. Considering our busy work schedules, I brought up the idea of timing our honeymoon carefully. This might be our only chance to take a long vacation. Should we plan the honeymoon during this time? I asked. Yeah, that sounds good to me, Daniel replied without much thought. It seemed like a rare opportunity, as both of us would be free from work simultaneously. However, the wedding venue I had always dreamed of was so popular that it was fully booked for over a year. Faced with this dilemma, I proposed an unconventional solution. What do you think about having the honeymoon before the wedding? I suggested. I looked into it, and some couples do that. If we wait to have the wedding first, it could be another 3 years before we can go on this trip. If you're okay with it, Samantha, then I'm fine with it too, Daniel said without hesitation. His easy agreement gave me a sense of relief, but it also left me feeling conflicted. While part of me appreciated the lack of opposition, I wished he would share his own thoughts more often. His constant acceptance of my ideas felt bittersweet, as if he wasn't really invested. Still, I was glad that we could move forward without any disagreements, so I pressed ahead with planning our honeymoon and wedding. After much consideration, we settled on Europe as our destination. I had been torn between Florida and Europe right up until the last minute. Florida was closer, but I figured we could visit it anytime. The allure of Italy and Spain was too strong to resist. I was eager to wander through their beautiful streets, savor delicious food, and indulge in shopping for stylish accessories and unique tableware to celebrate the start of our new life together. Once our schedules and destinations were aligned, I finalized all the arrangements about a month before our departure. By that time, my excitement was at its peak. This would be my first overseas trip, and I was buzzing with enthusiasm, my mind filled with thoughts of Europe. From buying travel essentials to planning our activities, I was entirely consumed by the thrill of what lay ahead. In the midst of all this excitement, any lingering frustrations I had with Daniel seemed to fade away. Everything was falling into place, until just a week before our honeymoon, Daniel brought up something unexpected. It was rare for him to make any requests, so I was immediately intrigued, wondering if it might have something to do with our trip. Maybe he had found a specific place he wanted to visit in Paris. Filled with curiosity, I waited for him to speak. I asked him, "What's on your mind, Daniel?" Quite innocently, he made his request. "I want to visit Finch Melody Auditorium while we're in Paris. Mom wants to go there." I was taken aback. "Your mother? Wait, what do you mean?" I stammered, struggling to process this sudden change in our plans. To Daniel, it seemed like an obvious addition. "Well, since everyone else is going," he explained as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I felt a wave of disbelief as I grappled with the realization that my honeymoon was being turned into a family vacation. "We'll all be together during the trip, right?" Daniel said casually, as if this bombshell wasn't shattering everything I had envisioned. "What do you mean by everyone?" I asked, confused. "It's our honeymoon. It should just be the two of us." Daniel remained unfazed. "My mom thinks it's normal for the whole family to come along." I was floored. Daniel, I only made reservations for 2. Just you and me. The booking deadline was a week ago. Today's the last day to confirm our plans, and I've only registered us, I said, trying to keep my composure. It might still be possible for the whole family to join. If you talk to the travel agency, it might sort something out, Daniel suggested, his optimism almost infuriating. Before I could respond, the intercom buzzed. On the screen, I saw my in-laws standing outside with several bags. Without waiting for an invitation, they barged into the house. My mother-in-law's eyes gleamed with excitement as she announced, "I thought I'd drop off the luggage here since we're leaving soon. I'm so excited." Daniel quickly took control of the situation, ignoring my mounting frustration. "Just leave the luggage here," he said, leading them into the room as if this was completely normal. "Wait a minute," I interjected, desperately trying to halt the chaos. But my mother-in-law shot me a sharp look. "What's the matter, Samantha? I hope you're not saying you don't want us all to go together now," she challenged, her tone condescending. "I never agreed to this in the first place," I retorted, my voice firm. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "You heard her, she just said no," she stated, as if my objections were of no consequence. Then turning to Daniel, she coaxed him further. "But you always thought we would go together, right?" "Yeah," Daniel replied simply, supporting his mother's assumption without hesitation. My mother-in-law seized on his agreement, her smug smile growing. "It's completely normal for the husband's parents to go on the honeymoon. Don't you have any common sense?" Her words left me questioning everything, not just the trip, but the very foundation of my relationship with Daniel. As the tension escalated, she attempted to smooth things over with a troubling statement that only deepened my doubts. "I hope you won't ruin the trip with any unpleasantness. It's a special honeymoon, after all. And we all want to make good memories, right?" my mother-in-law said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'll make sure to teach you some common sense this week before we leave." She spoke as if it were a given that she and the rest of the family would be joining us. I felt my frustration boiling over. "This is a honeymoon, you know. Normally, it's just the husband and wife," I countered. Refusing to back down, I knew that if I gave in to her demands now, it would set a terrible precedent for our future. I was determined not to let that happen. But she remained unyielding, dismissing my concerns outright. "The husband's parents joining the honeymoon is just common sense. I can't believe you don't want to be with us. I thought we were becoming a family, but it seems our ideas of common sense are different. You don't seem to like me, and nothing seems to match." "How sad," she lamented with exaggerated disappointment, her tone tinged with insincerity. Her furrowed brows and words, "How sad," seemed laced with a hidden smirk, convincing me she was deliberately manipulating the situation. To my dismay, Daniel sided with her without hesitation. "Samantha, what's wrong with you? They're my parents. It's okay for them to come on the honeymoon, right?" "It's not possible," I declared firmly, my patience wearing thin. "We've already booked reservations for 2. Plus, I've never heard of families joining the honeymoon trip." Daniel's response was heated, as if itching for a confrontation. "I never realized you disliked my parents so much, Samantha," he exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. Then, coldly dismissing the conversation, he added, "That's enough. Just leave for today," his gaze piercing, as if he couldn't fathom my stance. As his words hung in the air, a sly smile spread across my mother-in-law's face. I stood there, bewildered and hurt, wondering why Daniel always sided with her, especially in such a crucial moment. The door slammed shut behind me, and in that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of her smug expression, a look that celebrated her victory. Alone, standing outside, I felt utterly abandoned. My heart ached as I wondered how I had been painted as the villain in this scenario, why this special trip, meant to be ours, was now on the verge of being ruined. Overwhelmed by frustration and sadness, tears began to stream down my face. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "I want you to check if it's still possible for my parents to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel this trip and find one that all of us can go on. Please think rationally and reconsider. We can sort this out if you do." His words stung, devoid of any acknowledgement of my feelings. Instead, there was only a cold insistence on his version of rationality. He didn't contact me again after that message, and as time passed, the distance between us only grew wider. I could sense that Daniel was likely just as upset as I was, though he hid it well. The day of our supposed honeymoon finally arrived, and despite everything, I had no intention of enjoying it. But after a month of preparations, I couldn't just walk away. As I was getting ready, the intercom buzzed. It was Daniel, here to pick me up. We hadn't seen each other since that heated argument, and I wasn't sure how to act around him. His arrival suggested he still intended to go on the trip, but there was something off. He had no luggage with him. Instead, he was holding a set of divorce papers in his hand. "You still plan to go on this trip after hurting my parents, didn't you?" he accused, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I'm taking my whole family on this honeymoon. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce." His words hit me like a brick, cold, final, and with no room for compromise. It was clear that in Daniel's eyes, his familial ties outweighed our relationship, and his mother's influence was the deciding factor. I stood there, caught between heartbreak and disbelief, realizing my marriage was ending before it had even begun. Daniel thrust the divorce papers toward me, his tone chilling. "My mom said it would be better this way." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. I had always thought Daniel would listen to me, value my feelings, and show me kindness. But now I saw him for what he was, someone who lacked conviction and placed his family's desires above our relationship. My feelings for him cooled sharply as I grasped the reality of our situation. Marrying him seemed pointless, especially with his overbearing mother in the picture. The future I saw with them was one filled with endless compromises and constant interference. Determined, I pointed at the divorce papers he held and responded with a decisiveness that took him aback. "Sure," I said, my voice unwavering, "but remember, I'm still single." "Single? What do you mean?" Daniel looked genuinely confused, his earlier composure slipping. "Weren't you listening? We talked about delaying the marriage registration until the day of the ceremony. I made sure to get your agreement. You didn't forget, did you? The marriage certificate is still in the drawer. You even said, 'If you're fine with it, Samantha, then I'm fine too.' That's right, divorce or not, we're not even married yet, so there's no problem with me going on the honeymoon under my maiden name." For a brief moment, Daniel's face flickered with recognition before turning crimson with frustration. "Are you out of your mind? You're giving up on marriage just because of a honeymoon. Get a grip," he exclaimed, his tone rising. Matching his intensity, I responded firmly, "No, Daniel. I'm giving up on you because you've already made it clear where your priorities lie." I stood my ground, unwavering. "This is the result of me being rational," I said firmly. "You've shown where your priorities lie, and I have to protect my interests and well-being. This wasn't just about a trip, it was about standing up for myself and my autonomy in a relationship that was turning into a web of conditional terms and unreasonable expectations." I realized that I had been so eager to get married that I lost sight of the reality I was stepping into. "I can be happy with someone who doesn't respect my opinions or support me," I continued, my voice steady. "I'd rather stay single for life. Thanks for helping me see that haste truly does make waste." Daniel's expression softened as his voice wavered. "Samantha, let's calm down and start over, okay?" he pleaded, his eyes almost brimming with tears. But I wasn't swayed. My resolve had solidified. I was determined to break free. In a moment of clarity, I raised my voice. "If you're so desperate for a family trip, why don't you go with your family of 3? This time, plan it all yourself from the reservations to the itinerary. After always relying on others, it's about time you understand how difficult it is. If you think you can handle it, go ahead. Take the reins, you indecisive man." Without hesitation, I pulled out the unsigned marriage certificate from the drawer and tore it into shreds right in front of him. His mouth fell open in shock, his face a mix of disbelief and panic. "Do you understand how serious I am now?" I asked, my voice unwavering. "I refuse to have a future dictated by others. It's over between us. Go cry to your beloved mommy, you mama's boy." I turned and slammed the front door behind me, leaving the stunned Daniel in the silence of his own making. I could almost picture him running to his mother, seeking comfort and validation. That evening, I contacted the tour company to cancel our honeymoon reservations. Even though it was a last-minute cancellation and I faced a financial loss, the sense of liberation, knowing I had made a decision for my well-being, was worth every penny. Afterward, I decided to bill Daniel for the entire cost of the trip. It was his actions, after all, that led to this fiasco. It only seemed fair. Later, David tried to shift the blame for our failed relationship onto me, spreading rumors among our friends and coworkers. But his attempts backfired. Among our circle, he quickly earned a reputation as a mama's boy, a label that stuck thanks to his past behavior. His bid for sympathy didn't gain him much favor. When I told my parents about the divorce, they were initially surprised but quickly supportive. Marriage isn't the only path to happiness, they reminded me. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Their words were a great comfort during such a turbulent time. On a brighter note, this ordeal reignited my passion for travel. Instead of letting the honeymoon go to waste, I decided to take my first solo trip. Traveling alone to overseas destinations was daunting at first, but it turned out to be incredibly fulfilling. I visited historic cities I had always dreamed of, and to my surprise, I found that I enjoyed the solitude. These solo adventures opened up a new realm of freedom and discovery for me. I began to love traveling on my terms, and now, I'm eagerly planning my next trip abroad. This new chapter of my life is one where I'm no longer defined by marriage or controlled by others' expectations. Instead, I'm embracing a life of exploration, of the world, and of myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan, and at 33 years old, I found myself grappling with significant personal challenges in the realm of love. After the disappointing end of my first marriage, I made a promise to protect my emotional well-being and steer clear of toxic relationships. Embracing the journey of self-healing and personal growth, I was determined to create a fulfilling partnership that would nourish my spirit. When I met my second husband, he seemed like the perfect match I had always envisioned. We shared a deep connection, and I truly believe we were meant to be together. However, as our relationship deepened, I encountered an unexpected hurdle: my mother-in-law, Carolyn. Her presence became a constant test of my resilience and strength. From the beginning, Carolyn tried to insert herself into our lives. She scrutinized my every move, critiqued my choices, and even attempted to dictate our decisions as a couple. But I stood firm. Having invested so much in my happiness, I refused to let anyone, even a mother-in-law, disrupt the peace I had fought so hard to create. Drawing from my journey of self-discovery, I confronted Carolyn directly, making it clear that her interference was unwelcome. My resolve was met with resistance. Carolyn was a formidable opponent, challenging my boundaries at every turn. Her persistent overreach, including inappropriate comments about joining us on our honeymoon, highlighted her lack of respect for our independence. Determined to uphold the boundaries I had established, I knew it was time to teach Carolyn a lesson about respecting limits. This was essential for her to understand the consequences of her actions. Carolyn's behavior was more than a personal annoyance. It threatened the stability of my marriage, and I was prepared to protect it at all costs. As I navigated these new challenges, I found myself grappling with her overbearing nature. Carolyn had a peculiar way of showing her affection, often overshadowing our moments with her excessive involvement. During family gatherings, which were typically relaxed backyard barbecues, she would often joke about joining us on our honeymoon to capture beautiful moments, or teasingly suggest she might take my place next to Stephen. At first, I dismissed these comments as harmless fun, laughing them off like everyone else. However, her relentless jokes hinted at something deeper. Was she truly joking? The idea seemed absurd. What kind of mother-in-law would genuinely consider intruding on her son's honeymoon? But as time passed, I began to realize that Carolyn might be more serious than I initially thought. This realization hit me hard on my wedding day as I prepared in the dressing room, excitement coursing through me for the life ahead with Stephen. The room buzzed with joy and anticipation when suddenly the door swung open and Carolyn's imposing figure appeared, casting a shadow over the festivities. I turned to face her, trying to keep my smile intact despite the unease growing within me. Without hesitation, Carolyn launched into conversation. "Susan, I need to talk to you," she began, her gaze intense. "Are you truly happy?" Her question caught me off guard. Of course, I was happy, overjoyed, in fact. Stephen was the love of my life, and our wedding was a celebration of our mutual affection and commitment. "I couldn't be happier," I replied, my voice brimming with sincerity. "Stephen and I are thrilled to be starting our lives together." This encounter was just another example of how Carolyn's presence could be unsettling and oddly direct, challenging the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. As I eagerly anticipated our honeymoon, a well-deserved break after months of meticulous planning, I was unaware that Carolyn had other ideas. As I adjusted my veil in the mirror, Carolyn leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a mischievous whisper. About the honeymoon, I've decided to come along. It'll be a surprise for Stephen, but let's keep it between us. Her words crashed over me like a wave. Was she serious? Wait, Carolyn, are you really planning to join us on our honeymoon? I asked, hoping for clarity or reassurance that this was just another of her peculiar jokes. Carolyn's face was a mask of determination. Yes, Susan. I've always dreamed of experiencing a romantic getaway like this. I'm his mother, and I've been there for all his milestones. It's important for me to be there. It'll be a bonding experience for all of us. Her words struck me with their audacity. Our honeymoon was meant to be a private journey for Stephen and me, a sacred opportunity to create intimate memories as a newly married couple, not a family excursion. I struggled to find the right words, fighting to keep my composure. I replied, Carolyn, this is our honeymoon. It's a time for us to deepen our bond and focus solely on each other. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, it's crucial to respect our boundaries. Her expression shifted from surprise to disappointment, clearly not expecting my firm objection. Susan, I only want what's best for Stephen. I thought this would be a special surprise for him, a way to bring us closer as a family. Taking a deep breath, I summoned the inner strength I had cultivated through my journey of self-discovery. Carolyn, I understand and respect your love for Stephen, but our honeymoon is sacred. It's a time for us to nurture our relationship and create memories that will lay the foundation for our future together. Stating my ground was essential, not just for our honeymoon, but for establishing a tone of respect and independence in our marriage. I hoped Carolyn would accept our wishes, but the tension thickened in the air as she processed that her plans had been thwarted. It was a defining moment, a test of our new dynamic, and in that instant, I felt empowered, having taken a crucial step in safeguarding my marriage and establishing a foundation of love and respect. You might think that would be the end of the story, right? Unfortunately, my friends, it didn't stop there. As the day of our departure approached, excitement and nervousness fluttered in my heart. Stephen and I were on the verge of embarking on our eagerly awaited honeymoon, a chance to relax and revel in our newlywed bliss. However, a looming storm threatened to overshadow our joy. It was the morning we were set to leave when Carolyn's name appeared on my phone. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for whatever she might say. Hello, Carolyn. Dear, I've decided to join you and Stephen on your honeymoon. Isn't that thrilling? Her voice chirped through the phone, sending a wave of frustration over me. Hadn't we already settled this? My voice tightened with exasperation as I responded, Carolyn, we've been through this. This honeymoon is a special time for Stephen and me. We need space to strengthen our relationship as a married couple. Her reply was casual, almost dismissive of my concerns. Yes, dear, but I've made up my mind. I'm coming along. It'll be a grand adventure for all of us. You'll see. With my patience thinning, I asserted more firmly, Carolyn, this isn't up for negotiation. Stephen and I planned this trip as a private getaway. You need to respect that boundary. A tense silence followed, punctuated only by the distant hum of anticipation. I sensed Carolyn's frustration mounting, but I stood firm in my refusal. Don't be so dramatic, Susan. Now tell me, you two are going to Switzerland, right? I've already booked my ticket. I know it was last minute, so I won't be on the same flight, but I'll meet you there. Her words echoed in my mind, but they also presented an opportunity, a chance to steer Carolyn's plans away to reclaim our honeymoon as the sacred space it was meant to be for Stephen and me. I believed that everyone could learn and change, but sometimes it took a bold move to spark that transformation. I was ready to make the move that would ensure our honeymoon remained ours alone. I had already made it clear to Carolyn that I wasn't interested in engaging in a tiresome back and forth with my in-laws. I needed to maintain the peace, so when faced with her unwavering determination to join us, I decided to take a creative approach to protect our private time. Keeping my cool and masking my frustration, I responded with a quick bit of thinking. Actually, Carolyn, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We're headed to New Zealand, not Switzerland. Her reaction was immediate, a gasp escaping her as she processed the sudden twist. Oh my, I must have misunderstood. Yes, I'll need to change my flight right away. Thank you for letting me know, Susan. Absolutely. Change that flight to Auckland, New Zealand, I replied, adding a subtle nudge. And yes, last-minute changes can be pricey, but I know you'd do anything for Stephen. Little did she know, Stephen and I were actually bound for Switzerland. I felt no remorse for the deception. It was a necessary act to preserve our much-needed privacy. Carolyn hurried off to adjust her travel plans, and as I ended the call, a sly smile spread across my face. For now, our honeymoon was safe from any unwanted interference. With each passing minute, my sense of relief grew. Stephen and I were free to start our journey without the looming presence of Carolyn's meddling. It was a small victory, but a significant one, proving my resolve to protect what was sacred to us. As our plane descended into Switzerland, the excitement between us was palpable. The breathtaking landscapes, historic architecture, and vibrant culture awaited us. Stepping off the plane, Stephen exclaimed in awe, "Susan, look at this view. Can you believe we're actually in Switzerland? It's even more beautiful than I imagined." "I know, Stephen. It feels like we've stepped right into a fairy tale. I can't wait to explore everything," I replied, equally enchanted by the setting. We arrived at our charming hotel in the heart of Geneva, immediately taken by its elegant decor and cozy ambience. The city buzzed with history, art, and music, and we were eager to dive into this cultural feast. "This hotel is incredible, Susan." "Great choice," Stephen remarked, appreciating the atmosphere that promised to make our honeymoon memorable. "Indeed, we're here to immerse ourselves in the beauty of Geneva, celebrating our new life together in a place as magical as our dreams." "I'm really glad you like it, babe. I wanted our stay to be perfect," I responded, thrilled by Stephen's appreciation. As soon as we arrived, our excitement overcame our weariness. Hand in hand, we walked through the enchanting streets of Geneva, soaking in the grandeur of the Palais des Nations and savoring delicious confections from the charming local cafes. "Stephen, can you believe the beauty of this place? The Alps are breathtaking," I exclaimed, my heart full of joy. "I'm blown away, Susan. This is a dream come true. Thank you for planning such an amazing honeymoon," Stephen exclaimed, his eyes shining with happiness. Exhausted but fulfilled, we returned to our hotel, deciding to rest before continuing our adventure. As Stephen headed for the shower, my phone rang. It was Carolyn. "Hey, Carolyn, that's great. I hope you have a safe flight," I said, trying to keep my tone upbeat. "Oh my gosh, I can hardly contain my excitement. I can't believe you're actually joining us in Auckland. We're going to have the most incredible time together at the Oceanfront Hotel. You won't believe the breathtaking views of the harbor," Carolyn gushed. I maintained my facade with enthusiasm. "Oh dear, Carolyn, I'm equally thrilled to embark on this adventure with you. I'm so glad you finally came to your senses and saw the beauty in me tagging along on your honeymoon." "I knew you'd be understanding," Carolyn replied, her voice brimming with satisfaction. I rolled my eyes but kept up the act. "Absolutely, Carolyn. You're so right. The flight may be a bit tiresome, but trust me, Auckland will captivate your heart with its vibrant cityscape, the iconic opera house, and stunning beaches. You'll be in awe." "Oh, that sounds marvelous. I simply can't wait to experience it all." "Susan, I hope Stephen is ready for some quality mother-son bonding time. This trip will give us a chance to connect on a deeper level," she continued, blissfully unaware of the mix-up. "Carolyn, when Stephen sees you, be over the moon. It's going to be an unforgettable journey filled with laughter, exploration, and beautiful memories," I assured her, masking my true feelings about the situation. "That warms my heart, Susan. I'm eager to create lasting memories with both of you. Rest assured, once I land in Auckland, I'll reach out to you immediately. That will be our signal to commence this grand adventure," Carolyn concluded. "Perfect, Carolyn. The moment you touch down, give me a call and we'll coordinate our plans," I said, ending the call with a sense of relief, knowing our actual destination remained just between Stephen and me. As I hung up, a playful twinge of mischief washed over me. The thought of Carolyn discovering we were actually in Switzerland, not New Zealand, sparked gleeful anticipation within me. I hoped this mix-up would serve as a powerful lesson in respecting boundaries and allowing my marriage to Stephen to blossom without her overbearing involvement. The prospect of Carolyn's forthcoming surprise added an exciting layer to our Swiss adventure, heightening the joy bubbling in my spirit. It felt a bit like a game, but the desire to share an unencumbered journey with Stephen, crafting memories meant just for us, was too enticing to resist. However, as I hung up, a mix of relief and anxiety began to settle in. Stephen emerged from the shower, noticing my distracted state. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing the shift in my mood. My initial delight faded, replaced by a twinge of guilt about the entire escapade. I hadn't fully considered how Stephen might feel about the deceptive tactic I employed against his mother. The last thing I wanted was to sow seeds of deceit at the start of our new life together. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to come clean. "Stephen, I have to confess something," I began, the words heavy on my tongue. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern etching his brow. "Not exactly," I admitted. "You know how Carolyn always joked about tagging along on our honeymoon? Well, she was serious. She intended to join us." His expression shifted from worry to disbelief. "What the hell?" I told her that was out of the question because this time is meant for just us. "I know," I said, my voice faltering, but she wouldn't take no for an answer, so I mistled her about our destination. Instead of arguing, I told her we were going to Auckland, hoping it would keep her from intruding on our privacy. I recounted the whole story, apologizing at every turn. I didn't want Stephen to think I was manipulative or cruel. I simply wanted to safeguard our time together from his mother's overbearing ways. He was silent for a moment after I finished, leaving me anxious about his reaction. Then, to my surprise, he burst into laughter, his genuine amusement filling the room and easing my tension. "You sly fox, Susan. I can't believe you did that. Honestly, it's a relief. My mom's interference has always been exhausting. Now we can truly enjoy our time together." "Wait, so you're not mad?" I asked, surprised yet relieved. "I'm not thrilled about sending her to a foreign country," he chuckled, "but I find the whole situation hilarious. I'm just picturing her face when she realizes the mix-up." We both laughed together, feeling a renewed sense of unity. With the weight of the situation lightened, we immersed ourselves in the beauty of Switzerland, exploring its rich history, breathtaking landscapes, and vibrant culture. Each moment deepened our bond and created cherished memories. Meanwhile, Carolyn remained blissfully unaware that her son found the situation amusing and was in on the ruse. Exhausted from her flight, she called us, expecting us to pick her up from the airport. "Hey, Carolyn, Stephen and I are together right now. There's something you need to know. We're not in New Zealand. We're actually in Switzerland," I said, putting the phone on speaker. "But you said Auckland, the oceanfront hotel," Carolyn stammered, confusion evident in her voice. "Yeah, that was all a trick, Carolyn. Sorry about that, but you really needed to learn," I explained firmly. "A trick for what? What did I do?" she exclaimed, disbelief rising in her tone. "You kept trying to insert yourself into our honeymoon? What kind of mother does that? When you insisted on tagging along, instead of fighting with you about it, I decided to let you believe what you wanted. This way, I could enjoy some quality time with my husband." "How could you do this, Susan? I trusted you. You're no good for my son." Carolyn's hurt was palpable. Stephen, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. "Mom, it's time you understand that meddling in our lives and disregarding Susan's boundaries has consequences." This was her way of setting a boundary. "What? You too?" Carolyn's voice cracked as she absorbed his stance. This moment, fraught with tension, underscored our commitment to each other and the importance of respecting our new family unit. "I can't believe you're taking her side. I can't believe you've deceived me like this. I raised you. I've been there for you through everything." Carolyn's voice trembled with hurt. "Mom, this isn't about deception. It's about setting boundaries," I replied, trying to convey the necessity of our actions. "Susan and I are building our lives together. You must respect our choices and let us forge our path. We love you, but maintaining healthy boundaries is key." Her voice echoed through the phone, loud enough to attract attention nearby. "You've humiliated me. I can't believe my son would turn against me like this." "Carolyn, please try to see where we're coming from," I urged, my tone steady yet empathetic. "This wasn't done to embarrass you. We need to make it clear that we require our own space and independence. It's time for you to let us build our lives and respect the boundaries we've established." "I don't want to hear it. You both are selfish and ungrateful," she shot back, her frustration palpable. "Call me back when you're ready to have a real conversation." With that, she abruptly ended the call, leaving herself likely bewildered and upset at the airport. While I might have felt guilty, instead, I felt relieved. Standing up for our marriage's boundaries was necessary, even if uncomfortable. Wanting privacy on our honeymoon wasn't unreasonable. It was unusual for a mother to insist on tagging along. "Stephen, are you all right with how things turned out?" I asked, concerned about his feelings. "Yes, Susan, don't worry about Mom. She's embarrassed and frustrated, but maybe this will finally show her that her behavior isn't okay. She needs to respect our boundaries, whether she likes it or not, he reassured me, his tone resolute yet caring. As we continued our honeymoon in Switzerland, enjoying the stunning vistas and cultural delights, the issue with Carolyn receded into the background. We decided she would contact us when she was ready to reconcile, and perhaps she would make something of her unplanned trip to New Zealand. Regardless, I felt confident she'd think twice before trying to interfere with our plans in the future.